Hi, hello, friends. Today we are going to see about reincarnation in Naruto with Useless System Part 8. Don't forget to subscribe the channel before you see the video, so you will get new updates. My Instagram link is given in the description. Don't forget to follow. Let's get in the video.
Now this was an unfortunate match. And not only for Ino. This won't be fun at all. Daiki groaned inwardly. And not only that, but how was he supposed to show off, with an opponent he could beat in what amounted to a blink of the eye? And it royally sucked for Ino. He was literally her worst matchup possible. Oh well, nothing for it, he mused with a shrug, before hopping down. Nobody wished him luck, not even Hinata, because nobody thought he'd need it, he was sure. While it was a bit disappointing for him. For Ino, as she made her way down, trudging her way down more like, it seemed more as if she was headed towards the gallows. Poor girl. There was a massive grimace on her pretty face as she took her position in front of him and her shoulders were slumped. This seriously isn't fair. The blonde pouted. At least you have the courage to actually face me, Daiki replied. There wasn't really much he could do here to console her. They both knew how this would end. It's impressive on of itself you have the guts to stand against the strongest guy here after all. I am pretty great, she agreed, her frown twitching into a brief smile, before she sighed. No way I can beat somebody stronger than Sasuke-kun though. Don't feel too bad about it. Daiki shrugged, and spread his arms wide and let his voice become louder, making sure everyone heard him. After all, there isn't a single genin here that can beat me. Hell, every other genin here could come at me at the same time and I'd still clap every single one of them. Yeah. Why don't you say that to my face? He heard Naruto shout from behind him. Yeah. Don't talk shit, Daiki, you prick. Kiba agreed with him. I would be most interested in testing that, Daiki-kun. Such a youthful boast. Lee added. I hate this kid. Kankuro's grumble was quite audible as well. That doesn't actually make me feel all that much better since I actually do have to fight you and not any of them. Ino pouted. I don't suppose you'd be willing to throw the fight. Usually, I'd be all for it if you made it worth my while. Daiki mused, voice lowering so it wasn't heard quite as easily. Sadly, can't do that. It's my mission to go all Tobirama on this exam and make Konoha great again. The second Hokage. Ino raised an eyebrow at him. Wait, mission? I mean, you already heard back in the first exam along with everyone else. I'm the big bad ringer, he grinned. I'm here to kick ass, take names and show off. Basically, since this is a dick measuring contest for all possible clients to see, the old man wanted me, the guy with the biggest dick of all, to swing it around and clap cheeks. Ino took a moment to process his words before nodding. That does kinda make sense with what Hokage-sama just told us, she nodded slowly. Before snorting, you should be careful with boasts like that though. What'll you do if somebody actually calls you out and asks you to prove how big a deal you are? She grinned. Depends on who's asking. Daiki shrugged, not missing a beat. I mean, if you want me to prove it, I have no problem at all whipping it out gorgeous. Ino blinked and was stunned into silence, face turning a crimson red. Hayat sighed. Can we get a move on please? Sure. Daiki shrugged. And I'll be generous, Ino. Give you a chance to show off. I'll give you 20 seconds. I won't attack back at all, so feel free to come at me with everything you have. Wait, seriously? She blinked again and gaped at him. Seriously serious? He nodded. I mean, you earned your spot here. It wouldn't be kosher if you didn't get the chance to prove your mettle and show if you're chunin material just because you're up against a guy that can slap around jonin like little brats. Ino bit her lip. Usually, I'd be insulted at this, but I saw how easily you dismantled that rain guy. This fight would be over in instant if you didn't. She grudgingly accepted. She had her pride as well after all. Alright, enough of this. Hayat groaned and promptly declared the beginning of the match. Daiki crossed his arms and smirked. Ino took that as his approval for her to go right ahead. She visibly channeled chakra through her feet and propelled herself towards him with a burst of speed. It wasn't the Shunshin. but more of a rudimentary prelude to it. Not a bad idea either. She rushed through a couple of hand seals, and a cloud of smoke erupted around her, and just like in the previous match, multiple blondes erupted from the smoke. Each were holding handfuls of shuriken and quickly spread apart, spreading out from around his front. Each let loose, slinging 10 shuriken each towards him. A hail of 50 shuriken shot towards him. Only 10 of them were actually real though. The barrage of 10 coming from his far left, Ino had switched her positions with one of her illusionary clones to try and throw him off. A decent use of the Academy clone jutsu. Too bad he could see straight through them. He sidestepped them easily, allowing them to fly straight past his body, and didn't even blink as the rest of the shuriken passed straight through his body as if they were never there. All 5 Inos grimaced noticeably. Damn it. The real blonde cursed, and the other clones disappeared a moment later. She kept rushing him though, lunging into a thrusting knee strike, all her weight and strength behind it. He juked slightly to the side, letting her sail right past him. She landed a moment later and immediately whirled into a roundhouse kick aimed at the back of his head. He stepped forward and let it pass. Through empty air. He'd give Ino one thing. While she wasn't all that fast, she was quick mentally and immediately kept the attack up, aiming for a punch aimed at his kidneys. Her technique was basic, but well polished and aiming for vital points constantly. 4. He mentally counted as he spun slightly out of the way of her punch, even as she dug her feet into the ground and shot right back around to him, exploding into a flurry of punches and kicks that he weaved around or deflected. Your taijutsu isn't bad at all, he praised, though your conditioning could do with a little work, and you need more jutsu for sure, 'cause you have no options beyond this with me. Has your sensei not been teaching you anything? Honestly, what the hell was up with Kakashi, Kurenai and Asuma? They didn't seem to teach their students jack shit. 7, 8. He mentally counted as the match went on. Asuma sensei is just as big a lazy bum as Shikamaru and Choji. Ino grunted, not letting up at all. He's only drilled us physically and taught us to attack as a team. That sounded familiar. Hey, you know, the more I hear about how the Jonin are teaching you guys, Daiki mused idly as he deflected a punch over his shoulder by poking Ino's wrist with one finger, the more I'm glad I never ended up with one. Sounds like a total waste of time. Lucky you, Ino grunted, whipping her hand back to try and grasp his neck at the same time she jumped into a rising knee aimed for his chin. He was fast enough that a simple diagonal step backwards allowed him to evade both, and Ino grunted again in frustration. Midair for only a moment, she grabbed a trio of kunai from her pouch, lobbing one with a flick of her finger aimed at his face. He tilted his head to the side and caught it by the handle. With his teeth. That's just absurd, Ino growled, even as she switched one of the 2 kunai remaining in her hand to her offhand and landed, pushing off with a burst of chakra and dual-wield slashing at him. He clasped his hands behind his back at the same time. He blocked and deflected her blows using only the kunai held between his teeth. And to think, Isabu thought he shouldn't have Roronoa as his middle name. Time ran down quickly, and Ino was no closer to hitting him. 18, 19. He idly counted off. Ino visibly ground her teeth together as he parried one of her slashes down with the kunai in his mouth, the force behind it actually forcing her to kneel on one leg. She showed a surprising amount of skill though when she flicked her fingers up, letting the kunai in the hand he'd just parried shoot up towards his chin. At the same time she pushed back with her back leg and tossed the one in her other hand. One coming up for his chin, the other straight for his heart. A pincer technique, cutting off any escape avenue beyond one side. At the same time her hands came together in an unfamiliar seal as she shot back and landed, a square-like space gap between her fingers. 20. Daiki declared aloud. And then he moved. He disappeared in a blur of speed and Ino's eyes widened. She never got the chance to fire off her special clan jutsu, because Daiki was suddenly behind her. One hand wrapping around her waist and pinning her arms to her sides, while the other wrapped around her throat and pinned her bodily to his chest. And that's match. Daiki grinned down at the blonde. Not bad at all, Ino. You're a lot more skilled than I thought you were. Easy for you to say when you danced around me like a child. Ino sighed. Well, whatever, I already knew it would end like this. With you pinned against me? Daiki asked, grin widening. Ino tensed in his grip, suddenly realizing their position before relaxing and tilting her head up slightly to grin at him. Well, it's not a bad position to be in, she shrugged, though only because he allowed it. Did you want to show me you weren't lying about your boasts that much earlier? She flirted, surprising him a bit, and wiggled her backside against his hips. Ellipsis. This could be bad. While usually he wouldn't mind at all. Currently, there was one girl specifically whom he was flirting with and preparing to possibly pursue a relationship with. One girl whom was watching right now from above. It was one thing to flirt with other girls when he still wasn't in a relationship with Tenten. It was another to do it in front of her. Wait, why do I feel 4 different killing intents? Daiki blinked, confused. Did somebody have a crush on Ino that he didn't know about? I mean, if you want to see it, just look me up after this exam where we can have some privacy and I don't mind giving you an up-close and personal look. Daiki replied, and released her, stepping back. You tease, Ino pouted at him, even as she turned around and idly rubbed her throat. Well, I'll keep that in mind. With that said, the blonde turned to Hayat, who was watching him dryly, his gaze completely unimpressed. So yeah, Proctor guy, I give up, surrender and all that, she declared. Ahoo, Hayat deadpanned, before slowly lifting his hand into the air. Yamanaka Ino has surrendered. The winner is Yurei Daiki. Please quickly vacate the arena so we can choose the next match participants, he said, voice completely monotone. He looked completely done with life. As the match ended, Ino visible shuddered. Man, is it cold in here or what? I just had this shiver go up my spine. The blonde rubbed her hands together. Daiki shrugged at the blonde girl's words and took his leave, making his way back up to the railing above. As he did, though, and made to walk back to his spot, he passed by Guy and his team, and a certain bun-haired girl wasn't very content to let him just go by. Tenten grabbed his arm and pulled him in beside her. As she did, he thought he saw Hinata narrow her eyes in his direction. Really? Tenten questioned him, gaze dry. The hell was with the flirting? Animal magnetism, Daiki replied with a shrug and grin. It was more Ino flirting with him after all. Then I might just need to muzzle you, she deadpanned. Ouch. Daiki winced, but before he could reply, a hand clapped him over the shoulder. That was a most youthful match, Daiki-kun. He looked over his shoulder to see Lee grinning at him brightly, though I am quite keen to test that boast of yours from earlier. Fine with me, he grinned back at the older boy. Just make sure you pass these prelims. I'll happily fight you in the real third exam and show you why I'm the strongest guy there is. Yosh. Lee pumped his fist. I will strive to do so. If I cannot defeat my opponent and make it to the third exam, I will run 5,000 laps around Konoha and on my hands. That's the spirit, Lee. Guy cheered him on. Neji, leaning over the railing, snorted. Such childish boasting, the Hyuga said, mere words with nothing to back it up. Somebody's a little salty he isn't the strongest Konoha genin anymore. Daiki shrugged. It's alright, Neji. I don't think any less of you. It's only natural to be jealous of someone as awesome as me. The Hyuga merely snorted derisively and didn't reply again. Somebody would really need to do something about that guy. Assuming Naruto didn't do it, Daiki supposed he wouldn't mind kicking his fate-loving ass around. Neji was a good ally to have after all, once he got that stick pulled out of his ass about fate. And well, Daiki was pretty sure he could get rid of the cage bird seal, plus he was in line to be Hokage so he could force the issue of abolishing it. He wouldn't stand for any of his citizens being slaves. If the Hyuga wanted slaves, they should just go hunt some rock humpers. You really need to learn to stop running your mouth, Tenten sighed. It's not like you're not strong, crazy strong and skilled for a rookie, but Neji's a genius, you know. I'm a genius 4, which is 40,000 times better than a regular genius. Daiki replied without missing a beat. Tenten gave a slow blink, before shrugging, okay. She apparently knew a losing battle when she saw one. He wasn't quite sure he liked that though. She clearly didn't believe him. I'm stronger, faster, more durable, no more jutsu, he shrugged and pointed out. On top of that, the gentle fist doesn't work on me. Don't go assuming just because you play with Hinata-sama and Hanabi-sama, that you've seen the true power of the gentle fist. Neji snorted derisively once again, not even turning around to look at him. The difference between my taijutsu and theirs is as vast as the distance between heaven and earth. Ooh. How testy. Being more skilled at it doesn't change what it does, and what it does has no effect on me, buddy. Daiki shrugged. But I'll happily prove to you how much stronger I am once we fight in the third exam, assuming you don't get your ass kicked. Your words mean nothing. Fate has already decreed that I shall be the victor. Neji replied simply and said nothing more. What a boring guy. He didn't get the chance at say anything else though, because Hayat apparently decided it was time to get a move on. And the huge screen began to rapidly cycle through names. Before landing on two surprising names, Daiki blinked. Ha, Temari versus Tenten. Maybe fate really did exist. Ha, guess I'm up. Tenten grinned eagerly, punching a fist into her palm. She had no idea that besides himself and Gaara, Temari was the worst possible match-up for her here. Gonna wish me luck? She asked him, grin widening. Good luck, he replied, giving her a half smile. If you win, I'll give you a present. Is it a lap dance? Tenten asked impishly, raising an eyebrow at him challengingly. If you want, but I don't quite have hips like yours. He involuntarily grinned. Well, I'll hold you to that then. She laughed, walking past him on her way down to the arena below, but as she did, she whipped her hand out and smacked him on the ass. He blinked owlishly. Tenten. Both Lee and Guy goggled at her actions in shock. Her grin turning massive, Tenten continued on her way down, even as killing intent spiked in the room to almost massive degrees. Moments later, the bun-haired girl was down in the arena, standing opposite of the blonde Suna Kunoiki, who had quite the venomous look in her usually lovely teal-green eyes. Her venomous gaze flickered up to meet his eyes for a moment, before looking back at Tenten, lips pulling back nearly into a snarl. Tenten said utterly nothing at the gaze directed her way. What's up with her? Daiki wondered. She was much more derisive and mocking originally, but now she was blatantly angry about something. Was it because of him taking the piss out of her the other day, mocking not only her, but her brother, her father and even her homeland? Maybe I should have given Tenten some advice. He mused as Hayat stepped up to begin the match. It might not change the results, but if Tenten knew in advance she would be fighting a wind user and that long-distance weapon techniques would be useless, her chance of winning by getting in close would be much better. He knew personally, after all, that Tenten was both faster and stronger than Temari physically and much more skilled in close combat. If she got close before Temari brought out her fan and pressured her, she could possibly win. Oh well, too late now, he mused as Hayat called for the beginning of the match. And immediately grimaced as Tenten leaped back, gaining distance, her hands flashing into her equipment pouches and unleashing a bevy of shuriken in the blink of an eye. Each spiraled through the air rapidly, and it wasn't just some random throw, each had their own specific trajectory, spread out and aimed towards Temari's vitals. If she was, say, a fire user, she'd have no choice but to dodge and give Tenten the advantage to press her. Sadly, she was a wind user though. Temari's hand went to the fan on her back and she pulled it forward, running wind chakra down its length. She didn't even open the fan itself, just whipped the huge metal base of it and sent a short but powerful gust of wind to meet the shuriken, blowing them away. That wind chakra metal is really something, he mused. It allowed the sandy blonde to perform high-level wind jutsu, without hand seals and more or less instantly. Is that all you Konoha girls can do? Temari scoffed loudly. Throw around hunks of metal like some little academy brat. Tenten's lips fell into a frown, but she didn't reply with words. Instead, she reached for her pouch, drawing 5 kunai and with a whip of her hand, sent all 5 soaring through the air like bullets towards the blonde, 1 aimed for her head, 1 for her neck, 1 her heart, and 2 at her kidneys. It was quite an impressive throw actually. This again, Temari scoffed, unveiling her fan ever so slightly and swinging it. Once again, a burst of wind chakra sent the barrage of kunai flying away. But Tenten wasn't idle. Already having leaped into the air, the bun-haired girl drew a single scroll, unrolling it and giving it a whipping motion as if it were a whip itself. Daiki saw her chakra spreading through the scroll itself, going through each and every single storage seal inscribed on the scroll. There was a burst of smoke, and a split moment later, dozens of different weapons rained down from above down towards the blonde. Swords, spears, sickles, scythes, axes, kunai, shuriken and more. And with their trajectory, they didn't just go for Temari's front, but as they fell, spread out so they were coming towards her from each angle. HMPH. Temari opened her fan a bit more and spun, unleashing another, though much larger burst of wind chakra that spiraled around her form and blew away all of Tenten's weapons once again. It was almost comically unfair how badly Tenten's skillset matched up against Temari. But such was the life of a ninja. Unfairness galore. If one couldn't overcome a bad match-up, they were destined to fail and die during their missions at some point, usually quite early in life. TCH. Tenten clicked her tongue as she landed. Done already, Temari taunted, slamming the butt of her fan into the ground and leaning on it casually, tauntingly. Not quite, Tenten replied. No, you are. Temari denied, the blonde heaving her fan up before whipping it around, the 2 moons on it displayed proudly, wind style, wind cutter jutsu. From the fan, a compressed torrent of slicing winds were released, roaring through the air towards Tenten. Just before they hit her though, the bun-haired girl launched herself into the air, a pair of scrolls pulled from her equipment pouches. The wind tore through her previous position, leaving great gouges in the ground. As soon as she unrolled them and channeled chakra through them, a pair of smoky dragons erupted from the scrolls and rushed down towards Temari. Or so it seemed. Rather, they slammed into the ground on each side of her and burst into a great cloud of smoke, obscuring both of the girls from view. Though Daiki could see them both easily with his eyes. Temari wasted no time in whipping her fan out, blowing the great cloud of smoke away. But it was enough. Tenten was already in motion. She spun like spinning top mid-air, rapidly rotating, and a moment later, a massive barrage of weapons launched down towards Temari. It was just like her previous attack. Only, the scale was vastly different. Where before it was multiple dozens, this time, it was multiple hundreds of different weapons that rained down like a metal shower of death towards the blonde. For a split moment, Temari's eyes widened in panic, before she regained control and unwound her fan properly. It's over. Daiki clicked his tongue. Wind style, raging gale wall. Temari swung her fan, all 3 moons on it blazing proudly with chakra. A massive churning gale erupted from the blonde's fan, and despite the massive scale of amount of weapons aimed at her, they were blown away completely. I'm still not done yet. Tenten roared as she fell towards the ground. She pulled her hands back and Daiki blinked as he saw chakra shining with his eyes. Chakra strings, not ninja wire. She whipped both hands out, all of the weapons lifting into the air and rushing towards Temari. It wasn't some full-on charge of weapons though, not something so straightforward. They spread out, coming at the blonde from all directions, from 360 degrees, aiming at every part of her body from her feet and ankles to her legs, stomach, chest, heart, neck and head. And the speed of the weapons shooting through the air was much greater than before. This is new. Daiki blinked, surprised. Everything had been going more or less the same as the other timeline, until now. She was using chakra strings. Not just a few, but literal hundreds of them at once. Daiki could see each and every single one of them spreading out from Tenten's fingertips, branching out like a glowing spider web. Chakra strings varied. For instance, Kankuro, needed to use a full hand to use just a single puppet, but controlling one puppet was vastly harder than just controlling the movement of a single weapon. While Tenten was using a vast amount of chakra strings, not a single one even came close to a fraction of the control of a true puppet user. She didn't need that kind of ability for controlling weapons though, which was why she was currently able to use so many. But when did Tenten get so good with chakra strings? Daiki wondered, even as Temari sent out a quick burst of wind to blow the weapons away and immediately backpedaled, getting distance as Tenten landed and whipped her hands again, sending the weapons back after her before they even hit the ground. Was it because of him helping her with her chakra control? That was the only difference with her that came to mind here. And beyond that, that's some amount of chakra she's using. He whistled lightly. Out of all the genin gathered here, beyond himself, Naruto and Gaara, Tenten definitely had the most chakra. Actually, she probably had more chakra than Kurenai if he wasn't wrong. Temari was a flurry of movement, ducking beneath her fan as a shield, spinning and unleashing burst of wind and on the retreat constantly. Sweat was already beginning to pool on her forehead and the blonde's eyes were beginning to shine with panic. The constant harrowing of the weapons and their speed left her little time at all to use a powerful enough jutsu to regain the advantage. And in fact, if she didn't have such a powerful wind chakra metal weapon to rely on, and had to use hand seals for her jutsu like most, she would have already lost. It wasn't Temari's skill here that was letting her keep up, it was her weapon. It just went to show, in a battle between equals, it would be those with the better equipment that had the advantage. Still, it had become more of a battle of attrition. Would Temari be able to defend long enough for Tenten to run out of chakra? That question was answered only partially. Tenten faltered for just a moment, the sheer amount of chakra she was using visible to him in how quite a few of her chakra strings flickered out, the weapons at the end of them clattering to the ground. And it was enough for Temari to gain a foothold. She slammed the butt of her fan into the ground, wind style, protective wind barrier. A churning barrier of wind erupted from the ground and formed a spherical barrier around the blonde, bouncing away the weapons Tenten continued on with. The barrier flickered away almost immediately after. This is it, Tenten declared, drawing her hands up and thrusting them down, sending all the weapons, still hundreds strong, towards the blonde. The blonde who had used the split few moments of being protected by her wind barrier to raise her fan up above her hand. Yeah, it is, the blonde agreed, wind style, great task of the dragon. A powerful gale wind sparked into existence up above, and a moment later, a huge, massive even, glowing green tornado of wind erupted and roared down like a churning dragon. Just before the weapons would have gave Temari the same outfit as a hedgehog, the massive wind jutsu shot down, enveloping the bun-haired girl, and almost immediately, the chakra strings flickered out and the weapons clattered to the ground uselessly. He heard Tenten scream in pain only for a moment, before her voice was drowned out by the roaring hurricane. That's some jutsu. Daiki grimaced, definitely an A-rank jutsu if he wasn't wrong. Though even with her fan enhancing her ability and making wind jutsu cost much less chakra to use, Temari could only hold it up for a short period of time. The blonde slumped to her knees, panting deeply, exhaustion etched on her face as she leaned against her fan. And a split moment later the huge hurricane flickered and died away. And Tenten came into view, her eyes shut and body filled with bleeding lacerations from where the wind jutsu had sliced into her body all over. She hit the ground a moment later with an audible thump, completely unconscious. While Temari panted deeply in exhaustion and kept a keen eye on her downed opponent, Tenten didn't even twitch. She was so still, Daiki might have feared that jutsu had killed her, if not for the fact he could still see her breathing, see straight through her chest to her heart and see it still pumping, if slowly. For an A-rank jutsu in scope, the damage it dealt wasn't all that special. Daiki noted, even with the wind chakra metal boosting her abilities, it seemed Temari still couldn't use that jutsu fully. Tenten is unable to continue. Temari is the winner. Hayate announced after a few moments of Tenten remaining still. That was his cue. Tenten-san. Lee vaulted over the railing down to the arena before and sprinted rapidly towards his downed teammate. He was still wearing his weights though. So before he even made it halfway to her, Daiki had already rushed past him and scooped the older girl up into his arms. Daiki-san. Lee skidded to a halt, blinking at him in surprise. I've got her, don't worry. He nodded to the older boy. Okay. The bowl-haired shinobi looked a little lost. Better him than the medic ninja on staff really. If any complications came about, he could provide way better healing than them. And he definitely wasn't gonna let Tenten die. He made a single hand seal even with the girl in his arms, a swirl of leaves forming around his body as he disappeared with a shunshin. As he did though, he noticed Temari's eyes, narrowing at him, or perhaps the girl in his arms. Instead of heading to the infirmary, where the medic ninja on staff would be around, Daiki instead headed for his provided bedroom. The furniture had been returned to their previous location in the room now that he wasn't going to be stuck in there any longer, so he lay Tenten down the middle bed. Now let's see, Daiki mused, looking the girl over. Her body was filled with lacerations, and a lot of her clothing had been shredded, blood oozing out of the tears. First of all, it was best to get a proper look. So Daiki made a single hand seal, a green aura forming over his hands as he used the mystical palm jutsu and began examining the girl's body internally. He hummed. The mystical palm jutsu was perhaps his most used jutsu beyond the shadow clone jutsu. He was very much experienced with it. So it didn't take long at all for him to examine the older girl's internal body and feel out her injuries. It wasn't too bad. Beyond the lacerations on her skin, she had some internal bleeding to go along with it in her stomach and her ribs were broken. Her left femur was heavily bruised and her left shoulder was cracked. Pretty bad, for a normal ninja at least, but nothing he couldn't heal up with his medical jutsu within a few hours. This was a good chance to experiment with something though. He focused on the seal upon his neck, drawing on the powerful combined chakra within that grew ever so slightly as time passed on. As he did, he focused the chakra into his eyes, his scarlet red eyes shining with a red glow that lit up the room. The energy shifted into pure life force and he directed it into the green healing aura of chakra around his hands. Almost immediately, it shifted into a bright and warm glowing silvery white energy and he spread the energy over the older girl's body, expanding it until it looked like she was wrapped within a protective cocoon of energy. Almost immediately, the gashes and lacerations along her body began to close up before his eyes and with the mystical palm jutsu, he could feel in real time as her internal injuries and injured bones began to mend as well. In just 30 seconds, he was done. And all of Tenten's injuries were healed as if they were never there to begin with. Well, the dried blood and shredded clothing spoke for themselves though. Not bad. Daiki grinned, dispelling his jutsu and wiping the sweat that had formed on his forehead from concentration. Experiment success, though he figured it would go that way anyway. Converting the energy of Gelul, star chakra and natural energy into a healing jutsu with his eyes, amplified the healing abilities of the mystical palm jutsu massively. And it only took a small spark of that energy within his seal. He could probably restore lost limbs with this kind of jutsu. It's not really the mystical palm jutsu either at this point. He mused. Well, it was only amplified. Kind of like the sage arts. Shinkugan style. Mystical palm jutsu. Maybe. Or maybe just mythical palm jutsu. If he was Minato Namikaze, he'd probably name it something like the mythical resurrection life revitalizing palm of the immortal starry scarlet turtle heavens jutsu. Now he was half tempted to go with that absurd name just to see people's reactions when he called the name of it out. A groan coming from the bun-haired girl on the bed beside him drew him from his thoughts and he looked down to see her eyelids fluttering open as she woke. Ugh, she groaned, before blinking and looking at him. Daiki, have a nice rest, sleeping beauty. He teased, feeling all right. For a second she just stared at him, before frowning and giving a disappointed sigh. So I lost then? She asked, shoulders slumping in defeat. More or less, Daiki shrugged. It was pretty close though. Her frown deepened. It sure doesn't feel like it. She could have blown me away with that stupidly huge wind jutsu at the end there at any time. Tenten clenched her fists and pushed herself up into a sitting position. It was all I could do to press her there at the end a bit. And you almost won because of it, Daiki pointed out. I was impressed with the chakra strings by the way. When did you learn to do that? She shrugged. I've been working on chakra strings for a good year now, though I'm not all that good with them. Even tried my hand at using puppets once, but I can only control one even with all my fingers, Tenten replied. After my training with you, my chakra control got way better and I figured using them like this I could make up for a lack of quality with quantity. But well, you see where that got me. She sighed. There's no shame in losing to Temari, you know, he assured her. She's a year older than you and is the oldest kid of the Kazekage. On top of that, she could only use her wind jutsu like she did because her weapon is a pretty high-grade wind chakra metal. Plus, wind jutsu is one of the worst matchups for you. Hell, she did far better than her other self had at least. Tenten snorted. A loss is a loss, Daiki. The excuse is pretty it up, but I still got my ass kicked. She shrugged. Though, you seem to know a lot about her. Something you'd like to tell me? She arched a brow at him and gave him a dry gaze. She confronted me over making fun of her brothers and village, he admitted. Ahu, Tenten's arched eyebrow seemed to pierce into him. And you flirted with her, she accused. Smartly on her part, maybe, he shrugged, though in my defense, she confronted me before you got to the tower. The bun-haired girl sighed. I'm really gonna need to muzzle you. Maybe get you spayed while I'm at it. Tenten shook her head. So, how long have I been out? Did I miss the end of the prelims? Nah, it's only been about 10 minutes at most, Daiki replied. I just brought you back here to my room instead of the infirmary to heal you up quick and personally make sure you didn't suffer much. Oh, she blinked blankly for a moment, before a small smile formed on her lips. Thanks, I guess. Though shouldn't you be keeping an eye on everyone to know what you'll be up against in the third exam? Nah, he waved her off. I already know what everyone taking part in the exam is capable of and there's nobody here that can beat me. She snorted. I hope that arrogance bites you in the ass someday. It'll break its teeth trying. He smirked. Tenten shook her head. So not cute, Daiki, she replied, before sighing and leaning back into the pillow, her arm coming up to cover her eyes. It's frustrating, she admitted. Daiki was savvy enough to know she wasn't talking about his cocky arrogance. This time, losing, he asked, getting to the root of the issue. Failing to keep up, she replied. I've always been way below Neji, but even Lee's leaving me in the dust. Guy-sensei has even been teaching him a super special jutsu lately. I train every day, I study my butt off, I collect every type of weapon I can find and learn how to use every single one, but normal stuff like this can't keep up with a Hyuga genius or the things Guy-sensei is teaching Lee. Did she know it was the 8 gates or not? Daiki assumed she did. After all, to use the Lotus, Lee had to open the first gate, and he wasn't shy in using it last he remembered. They're not that special, he assured her. There's a limit to how far the Byakugan and Gentle Fist can go alone, and Neji's approaching it rapidly and the gates are full of drawbacks that Lee is incapable of getting around. The best Lee could do was train his body and adapt as best he could to handle the strain. He wasn't like Daiki or even Naruto, who had innate healing abilities that would massively lessen the strain on him from the 8 gates. You even know about the gates, huh? Tenten mused, biting her lip. When you come away with stuff like that so casually, it almost makes me believe you're boasting about being as strong as you say you are. I'm being truthful. It's not my fault if nobody believes me until they get my foot up their asses. Daiki shrugged. I suppose seeing is believing, so you can watch me kick everybody's asses in the 3rd round. For a moment, she was silent. Then she lifted her arm from her eyes and looked up at him, her eyes slightly red and puffy. It looked like she had been on the verge of crying in sheer frustration. It's understandable, young as she may be, She has put a not inconsiderable amount of time of her life into training to become strong, Isabu mused. You are an anomaly as far as gaining strength as a human goes. You're a freak really with your obsession with grinding, but on top of that, you're a freak who cheats. Someone like her, who has no special teacher or the opportunities you have, will find it a struggle to progress after reaching a point. A cheating freak, ha. Well, he wasn't wrong, but still, hurtful. Still, he did have a point. Tenten had quite large chakra reserves and she was very, very skilled at what she did. But skill only went so far in the face of raw unadulterated power. Can you help me get stronger? Tenten asked. He blinked. Ha, okay. Daiki agreed with a shrug. Tenten stared at him. Just like that? She asked, looking quite lost. Just like that? He nodded. While he was going to be pursuing a possible relationship with this girl and as such it would be in his best interests to make sure she didn't kick the bucket on missions, there was also something else. Tenten had trained with more or less every type of weapon, to the point where she was basically a master of almost every type of weapon, or at least every type of general weapon shape. On top of that, she in the future would have went on to be able to use the tools of the Sage of Six Paths, be better with them even than the Gold and Silver Brothers, or Darui. The skill was there, the potential was there and the drive was there. If he helped power her up, she would be a great help in the future. Honestly, out of all the Konoha 12 as they were called in the other timeline, besides Naruto and Sasuke, Tenten was probably the easiest of them all for him to help reach S-class tier. Especially with what he had sitting in his dimension force seal gathering dust. Well, not really since there wasn't any dust in there, but the point remained. I kind of expected to have to plead with you a bit or something, maybe bribe you. Tenten pointed out slowly. I mean, you still can, it might make me help you even more. He pointed out with a grin. I'm partial to lap dances, I know. She cut him off, giving him a dry look. You're an idiot, you know that. I know you are, but what am I? Daiki retorted, grin widening at his epic retort. She rolled her eyes and sat up, and then surprised him by promptly standing up, only to sit right down atop him, straddling his thighs, wrapping her arms around his neck. Still an idiot. Tenten replied, before leaning forward and pressing her lips against his. It wasn't some epic passionate kiss, and more really just a chaste press of her lips against his for a few seconds before pulling back and pressing her forehead against his gently, staring into his eyes. Still, thank you, she said gratefully. Jumping the gun a bit, aren't you? He chuckled, wrapping his arms around her waist. You don't even know if my training help will be all that good, he pointed out. That wasn't for the training help, that was just me marking my territory, Tenten snorted. You've got too many girls hounding after you. Since when? His forehead wrinkled in thought. At most he'd flirted a bit with Sakura and Ino, but they were still solidly into Sasuke. Feelings didn't change that easily. Temari thinking he was hot didn't mean she had feelings for him either. Well, he did have that little heart-to-heart with Sakura, he supposed, and she was receptive to his flirting and seemed to have opened her eyes a bit. But that didn't really change anything at the moment. And it wasn't like she knew anything about his arrangement with Anko. Which, now that he thought about, probably wouldn't go anywhere since Tenten was all but saying she wanted to date him right now. He was a lot of things. Many of them bad, such as an asshole, a prick, a serial killer, a thief, a bastard, devilishly handsome, but he wouldn't cheat on someone. Unless they were cunts. Well, that sucks. Guess I won't be riding Anko like a pony, but oh well. He withheld a sigh of disappointment. Well, not really a big deal in the grand scheme of things. How do you flirt so easily and so much, yet still be such a dunce about this kind of thing? Tenten arched an eyebrow at him, deadpan look in her eyes. I'm a genius, what can I say? Daiki shrugged and unwound his arms from the older girl's waist, holding one arm up. But since you're big on marking your territory apparently, these will probably fit you best. He focused on the Dimension Force seal and pulled one of the summoning contracts out of it, the huge scroll appearing atop his palm a moment later. What's that? Tenten looked up, confused. A summoning contract I made, he replied, for a pack of giant black-maned wolves. They're big and will get tougher and smarter thanks to the contract, though they need training, so that'll be up to you. What? Tenten stared at him blankly. How the heck am I supposed to train giant wolves? Kakashi owes me instructions on training Ninken, so I'll give them to you, Daiki replied. I'll give you or show you everything you need to do to become super strong. The actual training will still be up to you though. He couldn't hold her hand through it, not when he still had a ton of shit and training of his own to go through. Oh. Tenten blinked. Wait, you're just giving me what amounts to being able to make my own summoning clan, training and all. Like, how do you even make a summoning contract anyway? 'Cause I'm awesome, like I keep saying, he shrugged, and yeah. A lot of what I'll help you out with will have to wait until after these prelims though and during the month leading up to the third exam. What do you mean a month leading up to the third exam? Won't it just be right after the prelims like the others? She asked. Nah, there'll be a month break before it to give everyone a chance to train more and show off to those coming to watch, he replied. That makes sense going by what the Hokage said. Tenten nodded, but, how do you know that? 'Cause I'm the next Hokage. Daiki smirked. Tenten rolled her eyes. If you didn't want to tell me, you could have just said it was a secret. Like anyone will believe that, she snorted. Why was it nobody ever believed him when he told the truth so blatantly? She unwound her arms from his neck and stood up, accepting the scroll from him. Still, thanks for this. She smiled down at him, summoning scroll in her arms. Don't mention it, he waved her off. Just call me Sugar Daddy Daiki. He winked at her. You have some weird fetishes, you know that. She replied blandly. First there was that simpering personality you had me put on, then the lap dance obsession and now this. It sure was lonely being a genius. Nobody understood his greatness but himself. A few minutes later, Daiki with a whistle on his lips leisurely strolled back through the halls of the tower and back to where the prelims were taking place. When he entered, it was just in time to hear, the next round will be Shino Aburame vs Sasuke Uchiha. Hayate announced. Neat, he got back in time to see Sasuke fight. He noticed though as he jumped back up to the balcony above, that the room was a bit less full than it was before. He couldn't see Kiba, Choji or that stretchy dude from Kabuto's team. He passed by Team 10 on his way over to Team 7 and couldn't even give Ino a wink as he went past. His attention was drawn to Shikamaru. The shirtless Shikamaru whose bare torso was littered with claw marks. Have a wild night, buddy? He asked with a grin. Shikamaru just gave him a bland look. That would have probably be even more troublesome. He replied, no, I just fought Kiba. Him and his puppy were a massive drag to take down. He beat Kiba. Interesting. Daiki would have pegged Kiba to be the one to win a match up between those two in an area like this. Where's Choji? He asked. He fought before Shikamaru. Ino shrugged, drawing his attention to her. He fought against the Kabuto guy's teammate, a total freak by the way who could stretch like he was made of rubber, and he choked Choji out. I can't believe Shikamaru is the only one of us to pass this stupid exam. Well, that answered that. You sure took your sweet time coming back, kid. He was distracted by Asuma-sensei speaking up before he could respond to Ino, and after rushing off with Guy's little girl too, something you want to admit. There was a grin on the bearded man's face, a teasing one at that. He seemed to be rather amused. Yeah, actually. Fess up. Ino pointed out at him. Is there something going on with you and that girl? Daiki grinned at her. That's for me to know, he replied, before leaning forward. And you to ... He flicked her on the nose before turning away, continuing on to Team 7. He heard Ino growl behind him and his grin widened. Tenten's fine, he assured Lee and Guy as he passed them as well, before they could ask. So hip and cool, he heard Lee say behind him. Well, look who it is, Mr. Knight in shining armor himself, Kakashi looked up from his book as Daiki approached him and his team. Did your fair maiden give you a reward smooch? Yes, actually. A very nice one, to be honest. Chaste as it was. Not that Daiki was going to mention that when Sakura was standing right there, her head turning away from looking down at Sasuke to him when Kakashi spoke. Just because you're a virgin, Kakashi, doesn't mean you get to live vicariously through me. Daiki responded idly. He was really only half paying attention to Kakashi. The rest of his attention was focused on the arena below, specifically on the black-haired Uchiha that had paused upon his return to the massive room and looked up at him, staring him straight in the eye. They held eye contact for a few moments, before Sasuke smirked and turned away facing his opponent, Shino. You can cut the tension with a knife, Kakashi commented with a giggle. Something you want to share with the class, Daiki-kun tilde. Kakashi-sensei, Sakura cried out, aghast. Daiki took his attention off of Sasuke and turned to look at Kakashi. He was going to give him a whopper of a glare. But he could only muster a deadpan stare when he saw Sakura's face was bright red and wearing a warped smile, green eyes glinting with interest as she looked between him and her teammate down below. Single quote ellipsis dot dot single quote. Daiki sighed internally. He forgot she was actually a total closet pervert and was into that kind of thing, or so Naruto's reverse harem jutsu from the other timeline had him believe. I don't get it, Naruto added, eyes narrowed into thin slits and face scrunched up in thought, making him look a bit like a fox. There's nothing to get, Daiki assured him with a wave of his hand. Kakashi is just a sad sack who's been dateless for so long that he's seeing things. Now that's just hurtful, Kakashi shrugged, eyes smiling all the way, but I'll have you know I see plenty of women. Name one, Daiki snorted. Your mother. Kakashi's grin was so broad it was visible through his mask. Kakashi-sensei, you can't say that. Sakura gaped at the man, head whipping around to stare at the man in shock. I just did, tee-hee. The man giggled, unashamedly. My mother's dead, you know. Has been for over a decade. Daiki shook his head, the implication not even fazing him. That says a lot about you, that your go-to is banging a corpse. I'm a man of cultured tastes. Kakashi shrugged his words off again, unlike a child like yourself. More like a man of small ability. Daiki emphasized the word, ability, and gave a roll of his eyes. If he wanted to play it like this, he could do it too. The only way for you to get to a girl's heart is with that Chidori of yours. Kakashi twitched, though it was so quick and so small. Daiki doubted Sakura or Naruto picked up on it. You're one ruthless kid, you know that. He shook his head. You started it. Daiki rolled his shoulders and smirked. I suppose I did. Kakashi nodded. Fair enough. And that was that. I don't have any idea what's going on. Naruto was looking even more lost. Sakura nodded right alongside him. I don't get it either, the pink-haired girl admitted and gave them both an odd glance. Why were you insulting each other like that? And bringing up someone's dead mother is just mean, Kakashi-sensei, especially like that. Naruto nodded. Daiki's a cocky dick, but you don't just say that to somebody, Kakashi-sensei. It's nothing personal, kind of. Kakashi chuckled. I'm just doing my civic duty to deflate the ego of one of our up-and-coming valued shinobi before it gets him killed. I just have fun taking the piss out of this guy. Daiki crossed his arms and nodded his head in agreement with the man. Besides, we'd be pretty shitty shinobi if insulting a dead loved one was enough to make us lose our cool. True, Kakashi nodded. For a hormonal cocky little brat, you have a remarkable control of your temper. Most in the same situation as you family-wise, would have flown off the handle at something like that. Yes, well, he was long since accustomed to, yo mama, jokes and insults. Anyone who spent any time on the internet needed some thick skin unless they only frequented hugbox safe spaces. Naruto grimaced noticeably and opened his mouth to respond, but the whiskered blonde was cut off by Hayate. Shino Aburame vs Sasuke Uchiha. Begin. The proctor called out. As soon as the fight began, both fighters moved in the exact same direction. Sasuke exploded forward, chakra pushing from his feet to give him an accelerated boost, and rushed towards Shino in a blur of speed. Sasuke had learned that little trick as well. Well, not like he can copy my jutsu, so it's no wonder he doesn't know the body flicker yet. Daiki mused. Sasuke could copy his taijutsu techniques, but he couldn't copy his ninjutsu. The way the Sharingan worked was that it imitated those in the vision of it perfectly and ingrained that in the user's memory with perfect recollection, akin to photographic memory. The problem in this case was that, thanks to the Shinkugan, he could wholly mask his chakra from even the Sharingan, and as such, Sasuke was unable to copy any of the jutsu he used when they sparred. As Sasuke rushed him, Shino fled in the same direction, backpedaling backwards rapidly to get distance, though noticeably much slower than Sasuke. The sunglasses-wearing Aburame lifted his hands up, jacket sleeves spread wide open, and a pair of hazy black clouds erupted from his sleeves, each swelling to larger than an adult man and shooting through the air towards Sasuke. Though these clouds were not made of vapor or smoke, but rather, tiny buzzing chakra-absorbing insects. Instead of retreating or even pausing to make sense of what was heading his way, Sasuke pushed off up into the air, rocketing up far above Shino, and ran through a blurring set of hand seals, before cupping a hand around his mouth and exhaling. Fire style. Fireball jutsu. Sasuke spat out a massive fireball, easily larger than 3 men put together, and Daiki had to withhold a whistle. It was easily the biggest fireball he'd seen Sasuke fire off. His chakra capacity has increased noticeably after being exposed to the cursed seal, just like yours did initially. Isabu commented. True, that did make sense. Not only was the fireball big, but it was fast as well. Shino had no choice but to cut off his backpedaling and rushing to the side, fleeing the attack that slammed into his previous position and exploded against the tiled floor into a wave of flames that washed outwards in all directions. Shino had to jump a split moment later to dodge that secondary effect, leaving him in midair, if only for a moment. A moment Sasuke took advantage of. The Uchiha had already landed and shot towards him, flicking his wrist and sending a bevy of shuriken spiraling through the air towards the bug user. The Uchiha didn't even seem winded from his fireball jutsu. By my estimates, his chakra capacity is currently around what yours was when we first met. Isabu added. That wasn't bad at all. If he remembered right, when they first met, his chakra capacity was approaching 50,000 and was in the Jonin tier. Shino drew a kunai in the blink of an eye and parried the shuriken coming his way, diverting them from slicing into his body. But it kept his attention busy for a split few milliseconds, which were precious when it came to ninja on ninja combat. Even academy brats barely out of their toddler years could outpace a sports car back from the other world after all. And Sasuke was far faster than one of them. Faster now even than he originally would have been. And Shino didn't seem to have changed at all. In parrying the shuriken, Shino lost sight of Sasuke, though Daiki did not. The Uchiha circled around in a blur, getting around the bug user as he turned, right in time for Sasuke to spring forward, launching a high kick that caught the bug user under the chin. Ho! Daiki's eyebrow rose in interest as Shino rocketed up into the air from the force of the blow, laying prone and airborne up above. And Sasuke used that chance to push up off of the leg he'd sprung off of to kick Shino and shoot up into the air after him. That's, he heard Lee shout in shock. Yep, shadow of the dancing leaf. Though, imperfect by the looks of it. It did get him into Shino's blind spot though. And Sasuke took supreme advantage of that, hooking a leg around Shino's waist from behind and spinning them both around before lashing out with an elbow that caught Shino in the throat as he tried to retaliate with the kunai in his hand. The bug user choked and Sasuke took his chance to launch into a barrage of revolving kicks all over Shino's body on the way down, before finishing with a handstand atop the other boy's head and driving a double mule kick straight into his torso, smashing him into the ground. Shino didn't stand a chance. Sasuke sprung off of their former classmate's head and landed lightly on his feet, dusting off his hands and looking away from the prone boy. Instead of paying attention to Shino whom he'd just defeated, The boy looked at Daiki and smirked at him. He could practically feel the smug confidence radiating off the boy, and he understood exactly what he was saying even without words. "You're next." Nobody said a thing for a few moments, until a good 5 or so seconds passed without any motion from Shino. After all, the chance was there that the boy had switched out with a bug clone. Though of course he hadn't. That was why Sasuke wasn't paying attention to the boy. He would have noticed thanks to his Sharingan if he had. They weren't shadow clones after all. "Winner, Sasuke Uchiha," Hayate declared then. "Yeah. Way to go, Sasuke-kun." Sakura whooped, cheering him on. "Damn, that bastard looked way cooler out there than me, K." Naruto crossed his arms and complained, though there was a smile on his face even as he complained. With his win announced, Sasuke smugly walked his way over to the stairs and up to the railing above instead of just jumping up at a leisurely pace while the medics came in to take Shino away. As that happened, Hayate looked to the huge electronic screen at the end of the room just as it lit up again and landed on two familiar names. Kankuro versus Hinata Hyuga. Ha, well, that was an interesting change as well. Looks like the quiet girl is up. Hababa right. Sasuke noted as he approached, smoke still plastered over his face. "Hinata," Daiki absently corrected him. His eyes were on the midnight blue-haired girl, so very different from the one who would originally fight in this place against her cousin. Kankuro had a huge smirk of his own on his face as he swaggered down, supremely confident. Hinata, though, walked at a measured pace, face blank and head held high. If it was the her from before, she'd be shrinking away from all the eyes on her. "That's what I said." Sasuke shrugged and stood beside him, leaning on the railing. "Looks like she's up against that loser from the sand as well. He wasn't that impressive when we ran into him. Let's see if this girl has actually become worth anything. I'll be disappointed if she loses pathetically after training with you." "You will." Daiki raised an eyebrow. He didn't think Sasuke had all that of an interest in her. "In you?" Sasuke's smirk grew. "If she can't even beat this clown, your teaching abilities are obviously subpar and you'll never make it as a Jonin sensei in the future." "Who said anything about me wanting to be a sensei?" Daiki raised an eyebrow, actually confused. "Weren't you bragging about your little apprentice to me before, Hitati or something?" Sasuke raised an eyebrow right back at him. "Hanabi." Daiki corrected him on reflex. "Same difference." Sasuke shrugged. Daiki gave him a deadpan stare, before making a single hand seal while Sasuke leaned against the metal railing, arms spread out confidently. He must have thought he looked cool like that. And would no doubt have been the epitome of casual uncaring badassery, if not for the doodles that popped up on his face, mustache, glasses, inky dick, jizz and all. Naruto erupted into laughter. "The heck are you laughing about?" Sasuke looked to Naruto, his second eyebrow joining the second. Naruto only laughed harder. Kakashi tittered. Sasuke-kun, what happened to your face?" Sakura tentatively brought up. Sasuke blinked. "My face?" he asked, lost. In response, the pink-haired girl swallowed, before reaching into her equipment pouch and bringing out a small hand mirror, and held it up for Sasuke to see his face in. Sasuke stared blankly at his doodled reflection, and stared. He kept that up for a good 5 seconds before his onyx black eyes swelled, burning into a crimson red with two rapidly rotating tomo in each eye. His head mechanically turned Daiki and he gave him a bloody red glare. "You," he accused. "That's a good look for you." Daiki smirked at him. "Dickhead." Sasuke's eyebrows twitched and a vein throbbed on his forehead. "I'll kill you for this," he vowed. "Then you woke up with your face in your cereal bowl," Daiki taunted. "I swear I'm going to revenge myself on you for this," Sasuke promised, fists clenching together over the railing, tight enough he could hear the metal groaning. "I'm not into dudes, sorry buddy," Daiki shot back. Forget his cute little apprentice's name, would he? "You will suffer the wrath of an Uchiha for this. I hear they make a cream for that now. Wrath not rash, you prick." That day, everyone gathered got to see rare sight of Sasuke Uchiha completely losing his cool. To be fair, Sasuke, it's not nice to forget people's names like that. Kakashi happily piped in, and then promptly had to duck as Sasuke launched a punch at his face, tittering all the way. All the while Naruto just laughed and laughed. The whiskered blonde laughed until tears came to his eyes, and he collapsed on his backside holding his stomach from the sheer hilarity he felt. The commotion they were making drew quite a few disgruntled or angry looks. Specifically from the Sand team. Even more specifically, Temari was giving him the evil eye once again. Not that he was all that bothered with it, or anyone giving him any angry looks for that matter. Still, Hayate gave them a pointed look. Their shenanigans were causing enough of a ruckus that it was holding up the next match. So Daiki, being the ever-generous lad he was, sealed away the doodles once more. It didn't stop Sasuke from glaring at him though. "Hate you," he said, leaning over the railing, facing down at the arena below, but his attention was on him, eyes glaring through his peripherals. "Hate you so much. You know, they say there's a fine line between love and hate." Kakashi hummed and Daiki resisted the urge to snort as Sasuke wrinkled his nose in disgust. "Still, fun as this is, what brings you to our little corner of the railing?" "We're standing right in the middle of it." Daiki deadpanned only for Kakashi to shrug. "I'm here for my payment, remember." "Oh, is that so?" Kakashi mused, before reaching into his pouch and pulling out a rolled-up scroll and tossing it Daiki's way. "There you go." "Wait, what payment? What's in the scroll?" Naruto asked as Daiki caught it. "Training methods for training dogs." The Tangenin shrugged, slipping it into his own pouch. That just seemed to confuse Naruto, and he wasn't alone. "Why?" Sakura asked, eyebrows raised and giving him an odd look. "I don't think how much of a dog you are factors into this kind of thing." Sasuke snorted, a smirk spreading across his face at Sakura's little dig at him. "Woof woof," Daiki replied. Sakura gave him a dry look. His attention was taken by the two who had made their way downstairs while their little commotion was going on. Specifically, his eyes were on the midnight blue-haired girl, so different from her previous self, who stood opposite Kankuro. "Oh great," Kankuro huffed, "not only do I need to fight a brat, but a little girl at that," he commented, arms crossed casually. Hinata didn't respond at all to his words. Instead she ignored him entirely and looked over her shoulder, her pale white eyes locking with Daiki's own. Kankuro audibly growled at being ignored, as if slighted. That was a good move on her part. Both Kankuro and Temari were all up on their high horse over Konoha right now and looked down on them as if they were lesser just because they weren't struggling financially like the Sand Village. Though he bet Hinata wasn't at all thinking of that. She smiled lightly his way and he smiled back, before giving her a wink and a nod. She had this. Her smile twitched up a bit more, before she turned back to face her puppet-using opponent. The white-eyed girl slid one foot back, both arms coming up, one slightly above the other, fingers pointed outwards, the beginning stance of the gentle fist. "TCH. Kankuro clicked his tongue. Hayate looked between both of them, making sure they were both ready before lifting his hand and bringing it down. "Begin," he declared. As soon as declared the beginning of the match, Hinata's chakra pulsed. "Byakugan," she voiced, and he saw the telltale veins pulsing around her eyes before she promptly pushed off, rushing towards Kankuro, who stayed standing still. A smirk played across Kankuro's face as she rapidly approached him. Only, instead of attacking him straight out, Hinata jumped, flipping over his body and landing behind him before launching a rapid two-fingered strike towards the bandaged object on his back. "Hey, that little hiding trick is useless against the Byakugan," Daiki smirked. There was a grunt of pain as she made contact, before a puff of smoke overcame the bandaged object and suddenly in its place was Kankuro. Only, not quite. Hinata's fingers smashed right through with shattering sound and Kankuro's visage fell away to show the bland, pale, dull-eyed expression of a puppet beneath. Behind the puppet, the bandaged object unveiled and Kankuro jumped out, gaining distance, one hand clutching at his shoulder where Hinata's two fingers had impacted initially. "How did you know I was there?" The older boy grimaced and demanded. It was a very convincing disguise. Hinata commented as she spun on her foot and lashed out with a roundhouse kick that caught the puppet crow in the neck and decapitated it as well, sending both head and body bouncing away. But my Byakugan can see through solid objects, she added and rushed forward towards him. Is that right? Kankuro ground his teeth and began backpedaling rapidly, trying to gain distance. The fingers of his free hand twitched, chakra strings in full view for Daiki thanks to his eyes, and he saw the puppet crow that had hit the ground split apart into several different pitches, before blades erupted from the split ends of its parts and shot towards Hinata from behind. He was intending to skewer her from behind while she rushed him. Not that it would work. Hinata tilted her head, letting one of the bladed parts shoot by her head, then lashed out with a quick chop of 2 fingers, chakra coating the digits. She severed the chakra string, controlling it easily. What the hell? Kankuro gaped, eyes wide with shock. Despite his shock, he wasn't idle though and let go of his shoulder and with both hands now controlled the puppet parts, each spreading out and shooting at Hinata from all angles like bullets. She was forced to stop her pursuit of the older boy and spin out of the way of one, ducking under another, jumping the next. It almost looked like she was dancing as she wove between each of the bladed puppet parts without ever taking her gaze off of Kankuro. How the hell are you doing this? The boy grunted out in frustration. Chakra ignited around Hinata's fingers as she got her timing down and she moved in a spiraling spinning blur, lashing out with both arms and slicing through the chakra strings of a puppet part each time she dodged. Upon the last one, she swept her foot around to bring her back around to face Kankuro and pushed off, rushing towards him. To quote a boy I know, Hinata replied, "Fuck you, that's how." Kankuro wasn't a physical specialist, so despite Hinata not being the fastest out there of the Konoha genin, she was still faster than him, and now with his ace in the hole taken care of, she had no reason from hesitating in rushing him. Bitch! Kankuro spat. Literally. Just as she was upon him, he spat out a few senbon, each point dipped in a liquid substance at point-blank range. Too bad for him though. Hinata ducked, skidding underneath them, feet grinding against the ground with chakra. "You are within my range," the girl declared. He could see them clearly with his Shinkugan, as could Hinata with her Byakugan. 2 palms, Hinata declared softly as one palm smacked into his solar plexus, while the other caught him in the chin, before she spun again and smacked his shoulders with 2 strikes and continued on. 4 palms, 8 palms, 16 palms, 8 trigrams, 32 palms. Hinata's hands were a blur of motion as she struck Kankuro all over his body. The last palm strike smashing into the core of his stomach and bodily lifting him up and sending him flying back a few feet to smash into the wall, where he promptly slumped to the ground unconscious. Ho! Daiki's eyebrows rose in interest. That was new. She could already use the 32 palms. From what he remembered, Hinata didn't actually learn that before until the time skip. She hadn't even shown that off while training with him. A recent thing, or was it something she wanted to surprise others with? It wasn't quite the 8 trigrams 64 palms or the 8 trigrams 128 palms that Neji could use already around this time, but it was progress nonetheless. Pretty good progress at that. The difference between the her of now and the her of the other timeline was like that of night and day. Unlike Sasuke, Hinata didn't take her eyes off of Kankuro. Just in case he managed to get up, she stayed in her stance, ready to keep on attacking in case he made any move. Hinata Hyuga is the winner, Hayat declared after a few seconds of the puppet user remaining limp on the ground. Only then, after being declared the winner, did Hinata relax, sliding out of her stance and letting out a noticeable sigh of relief. When did Hinata get so strong? Sakura commented. You can thank this idiot for that. Sasuke snorted, jabbing a thumb at Daiki. She's been training with this doof almost as much as me. Sakura blinked before looking at Daiki and her gaze turned dry. That makes sense. Hinata is cute, especially with that longer hair. And I remember someone going on about how he liked longer hair as well. The pink-haired Kunoiki commented. Her gaze flickered down to her hands where the seals he placed on her for his jutsu was. Well, the results speak for themselves. He shrugged, before looking to his side, specifically where Team Guy was. Lee was clapping happily, as was Guy. His attention though was drawn to the other male member of their team. Neji had his hands gripped around the railing so hard Daiki wouldn't be surprised if the metal was warped, and he was visibly gritting his teeth angrily. Dude needed to take a chill pill, man. That could be a problem though. Neji is pretty strong and a great ally to have, but with this, Naruto isn't exactly gonna get the motivation to kick his ass and remove that huge stick from it, he mused. So would he have to take care of that then? But Naruto's message had a much bigger impact because of how much of a failure Naruto himself was considered. Despite never actually being one, just poorly trained and ignorant. Well, it would be something he needed to look into at least. His eyes drifted from Neji to Hinata, who was making her way back up after being declared the winner. Her eyes were on him as well. He flashed her a thumbs up and a nod. He could of course talk to her in her head thanks to his eyes and the jutsu he learned from Fu, but he was leaving it for now. Better to congratulate her in private. She smiled brightly at him, cheeks darkening a bit as she made her way back to her team. Hey, guess not all of that shyness of hers had been dealt with. It was cute though when it wasn't her main trait. He looked away as she reached her team and was congratulated by Kurenai and Shino, Kiba still being in the infirmary. And he was just in time to see the huge electronic board light up once again and rapidly cycle through names before landing on 2 of the 4 left ready to fight. Sakura Haruno versus Neji Hyuga. Ha, well, she's fucked, Daiki mused. Then again, better Neji than Gaara. But she would have been better off getting Lee. Lee, while vastly stronger, would at least not hurt her too badly and would go easy on her, giving her the chance at least to display her skills. Wait, Lee and Gaara were the only 2 who hadn't fought yet. I guess some things are written in the stars, he mused. That could either be really good or really bad. If things go the way they did in the other timeline, then I should get ready to step in. Sure. Lee had a whole character growth thing with his broken limbs and risking his life in his operation, and Guy showed how amazing of a sensei he was, for Lee at least, willing to die with him if it failed. But just in case things do go wrong, I'd rather have Guy around, he thought. If it came to it, he'd heal Lee's legs himself using life force, but he'd really rather not waste any after emptying his reserves as he did before. As soon as her name appeared on the electronic board, Sakura had frozen up. She stared at her name displayed on the screen like a deer caught in headlights. Looks like it's your turn, Sakura-chan. Naruto didn't read her mood very well and thumped her on the shoulder happily. All you need to do is kick this guy's ass and all 3 of us will have made it through. Quote ellipsis dot. Yeah, she replied dazedly, biting her lip. Kakashi didn't say a word to her, not that Daiki blamed him, while Sasuke looked at the pink-haired girl with a raised eyebrow and didn't say a word either. He was just waiting for her choice. She should have known it was coming at this point when Hinata and Kankuro got called up. It had left only 3 possible options for her opponent and prepared something at the very least. Her head turned almost mechanically and she glanced at him out of the corner of her eyes, meeting his own. She seemed to want to say something to him. What are my chances of beating this guy with that jutsu you gave me? She asked. He'd like to tell her she had a chance. Maybe give her some advice that would let her gain an advantage. Close to 0, he replied bluntly and truthfully. If you could get an actual hit on him with it, you could win. The problem is, you're nowhere near fast enough, experienced enough or skilled enough to do so right now. As much as he'd like to do that, he couldn't, because he didn't have a solution for her right in this very moment that could allow her to defeat Neji. Sakura's shoulders slumped. I see, she grimaced. Sasuke's eyebrow rose a bit higher, but that was all the reaction he gave. Naruto, on the other hand, what the hell do you mean, Daiki? The blonde sputtered. Sakura-chan can totally take this guy. No, she can't, Daiki denied, crossing his arms. Frankly, even if you went down there and helped her, fought him 2-on-1, you'd still lose. No way, Naruto growled. I can take him. he declared, but even as he did, Daiki caught his blue eyes flickering over to Lee, who was cheering Neji on as the Hyuga made his way down to the arena and grimacing. Yeah, Naruto should already be aware right now that he couldn't beat Lee right now and that Lee had declared that Naji was stronger than him. So bluster then, hyping himself up because nobody else would. Well, Daiki understood that part at least, and he'd be a bit of a hypocrite to look down on him for it. He was the exact same after all. Daiki sighed. Neji is the Hyuga's big prodigy these days. As far as taijutsu goes, there probably isn't any genin here more skilled than him right now. I think I'd even lose out to him, he informed. Looking at Sakura, he'd give her this much at least and see what she made of it. His Byakugan allows him to see chakra through solid objects, have 360-degree vision, meaning he pretty much has no blind spots and see far off into the distance. On top of that, his taijutsu style is the gentle fist. One poke of his fingers can close your tenketsu and lock down your chakra and stop you from using it. On top of that, there's a good chance he probably knows the Hyuga's famous defensive jutsu, the rotation. He'll spin in a circle and unleash chakra through his tenketsu and create a rotating dome of chakra to use as a shield. Even my jutsu won't be able to break through it. Sasuke smirked as he digested the information for Sakura himself while Naruto clicked his tongue. That's bullshit, Sakura huffed, giving him a dead look. There's no way I can win this. Right now, yeah, you've got little chance. Daiki agreed with her, before reaching forward and placing a hand on her shoulder and giving it a soft reassuring squeeze. If you had an extra year under your belt like he did, I'd give you much better odds, but sadly life isn't convenient like that. Best advice I can give you. Just do your best, show off your skills and try to earn your promotion. Winning isn't the only thing that matters here. Oh right. Her pretty emerald green eyes widened in realization and she nodded. That's much more doable, she agreed. Get in there then and show us what you can do, he grinned lightly. She returned the look before leaving him behind and making her way down to the arena to face off against Neji. Quite the pep talk, Kakashi commented as she left, not even looking up from his book now that she was gone, and as usual your knowledge is something else. It's really not, Daiki snorted, rolling his eyes before glaring at the man, but just as usual, I'm doing your job for you. Why didn't you speak up and give her advice? Kakashi shrugged. Her best option is to surrender here and try again another time. This was just bad luck on her part. Maybe if you did your job properly she would have had a better chance. Sasuke cut in with a huff. Kakashi rolled his singular visible eye at him. You do realize being a Jonin sensei isn't about teaching you all jutsu and the like, right? That's something you can learn on your own time. The elite Jonin pointed out. My job is to get you guys experience on the job, show you how to do your jobs and make sure you don't die on the way. Teaching new jutsu isn't required for that. Getting taught new jutsu is not a privilege you're entitled to. Excuses, Daiki scoffed. You're just a lazy bastard. Well, you're not wrong. Kakashi shrugged the accusation off. Daiki rolled his eyes and looked away from the scarecrow-looking Jonin and turned his attention to the pink-haired girl making her way down to the arena. She was going to have a hell of an uphill battle, that was for sure. But if she can just make some decent moves, and then, he paused as a thought came to mind. He extended his chakra outwards in a rippling wave, directing it towards Sakura while he focused chakra to his eyes. Sakura, he said with the chakra transmission jutsu he learned from Fu. Sakura froze in her steps for a moment before continuing on. Daiki. She replied. Yeah, he said. Look, I've already told you pretty much all you need to know, but if you want to maximize your chances for a promotion to Chunin, I've got a decent idea for you. If Shikamaru could be promoted for it, then despite how much he disliked it, then he would take advantage of it. How? The pink-haired girl asked. Just go with any plan that fits what you've decided on from everything I told you, he replied. Show everything you can, and that's all. When you're totally out of options, just surrender. Surrender? But won't that make me look like a coward? She asked in her thoughts. To some, he confirmed, but to others looking too much into it, they'll see you making the smart choice to disengage from an enemy you can't defeat, and it'll put marks for maturity and intelligence in your favor. Ah, right, just like what Iruka-sensei said about heaven and earth, neither one is good enough alone. I can't just be strong, I have to smart as well, the pink-haired girl replied in realization. Right, I can do this. Thanks. Don't mention it, I've got your back. He waved her off. Hey, you've made no attempts to hide that, she giggled. Daiki raised an eyebrow at her words, before shrugging them off and cutting off the flow of chakra. Moments later, Sakura took her place in across from Neji and wasted no time falling into a loose ready stance that would allow her optimal chance to spring forward or backwards depending on how things went. Neji in contrast gave her a dispassionate glance, his arms crossed in an almost bored fashion. He wasn't taking her seriously at all. Not that Daiki could blame him. There wasn't much Sakura could do to him at this point in time without him being taken utterly by surprise. Hayate looked between them and nodded before lifting his hand into the air and bringing it down. Sakura Haruno versus Neji Hyuga, begin. He declared aloud. For a moment, none of them made a move. Sakura was tense, ready to move at a moment's notice, but Neji didn't make a move. This is foolish, the older white-eyed boy scoffed. You should just surrender while I'm feeling generous. You have no chance at all at defeating me. I won't know that unless I try, the pink-haired girl replied tightly. Neji scoffed again. Utter stupidity. I have already seen all you are capable of and you fall vastly short of the level needed to even make me sweat, he replied. The only thing of note you have to your name is one singular jutsu that was given to you by someone else, a jutsu you can't even use without hurting yourself. Do yourself a favor and accept your fate and give you. As Neji was getting into his insulting tirade, still not taking the girl seriously at all and demeaning her with every word. Sakura used that chance to act. Her right arm, extended outwards, was flicked into a rapid jab. It wasn't anything blindingly fast and was actually very slow by Daiki and even Neji's typical levels. But it wasn't meant to be anyway. Chakra rippled and a split moment later, a large compressed shock wave of pure force erupted from her fist and tore through the air towards Neji rapidly. An audible crack echoed through the room as Sakura's wrist once again snapped from the sheer force behind the jutsu and the girl gave a muffled scream of pain. Sakura chose the perfect time to attack and took advantage of Neji's arrogant grandstanding. Neji's eyes widened as the jutsu was on him in a split moment and quickly he spread his leg back, arms going outwards and wide before rapidly rotating like a spinning toad. Chakra sparked into existence, howling out of his tenketsu and forming around him into a large spiraling dome. The shock wave slammed into the dome of chakra and an explosion of sound blanketed the room, drowning out everything else for a few moments. What the heck was that? Naruto sputtered as the jutsu was dispersed. It looked just like your jutsu, Daiki. Daiki barely paid attention to the blonde Jinchuriki. Instead his eyes were on Sakura. She hadn't stayed idle. As soon as Neji started spinning and unleashed his ultimate defensive jutsu, she rushed towards it, even as her right arm dangled useless at her side. Smart. He nodded approvingly. After all, Neji, arrogant as he was being in regards to Sakura and not taking her seriously, hadn't activated his Byakugan yet, so his vision was currently obscured within his jutsu and he couldn't see her getting close. When Neji spun to a stop and his dome shield of chakra flickered away, it was just in time for Sakura to reach him, getting within just a few feet of him. Neji's eyes widened in shock as the pink-haired girl once again took advantage of him not taking her seriously and threw a rapid punch out with her remaining non-damaged arm. Shanaro. The pink-haired girl roared. Once again the air rippled as a massive concentrated shock wave of pure force erupted from her fist at near point-blank range. Normally, this would have been the end. Even as Sakura's second wrist snapped and the force of the jutsu jettisoned her back, this should have been checkmate. The problem though was in the sheer speed difference between her and her opponent. On seeming instinct alone, Neji spun, chakra erupting and roaring forth from his tenketsu. He didn't manage to form a shield of chakra even half the size of his previous one, but it did do its job. Even if the force still traveled through. Neji gagged noticeably as pure force slammed into his stomach and bodily lifted him into the air and threw him back, the chakra forming around his body bursting apart. It hadn't been properly formed after all. Neji spun through the air before landing on his feet over 20 feet away, clutching at his stomach and glaring fiercely at Sakura, who had landed in a crouched position, pain visible on her pretty face as her arms hung limp at her sides, already purpling deeply with bruising. TCH, taking advantage of me speaking, how trivial, the Hyuga scoffed, though a decent plan for trash like yourself, it doesn't change that it is my fate to defeat you, he added, letting go of his stomach and narrow his eyes. Veins visible throbbed around his eyes and his white irises became more pronounced as he activated his dujutsu. He was just about to spring forward towards Sakura, no doubt rushing her down before she could even do anything and give her a mighty beat down. Only, he never got the chance. I give up. The pink-haired girl took Daiki's advice and surrendered. What? Neji was so shocked by the call that he actually stuttered forward a step. What? Naruto shouted. Sakura Haruno has surrendered. The winner is Neji Hyuga, Hayate declared, before calling for the medic ninja to make their way in. While everyone was busy being shocked over what just occurred, the pink-haired girl instead looked over her shoulder and met Daiki's eyes. He smirked and gave her a nod of approval. It was a very, very short bout, but it went a long way to showing Sakura's strengths and few of her many weaknesses. Clever girl, he broadcasted to her with his chakra. The smile that splayed across her lips was almost blinding. For a moment, nobody really said anything. The most telling reaction of anyone's, though, was Neji's. The frustration on his face was plain as day, his lips pulled back halfway between a snarl and a frown. He was clearly not happy with how things turned out. Not that Daiki could blame him. He may have won, but he barely displayed anything beyond the chitin in that fight. He never even landed a hit before Sakura used up her cards and gave up. The pink-haired girl not only got the chance to strut her stuff a bit and show multiple traits from ruthlessness to pragmatism and of course intelligence in knowing when to retreat from a superior foe, but she also stopped Neji from showing off what he could do for the most part as well, dropping his promotion prospects. His pure white eyes followed Sakura right up until she was escorted out of the room by the medics to heal her hands. Just before she disappeared through the doors though, the pink-haired girl looked back, her emerald green eyes meeting with Daiki's own. The large happy smile on her face practically made her glow. And then she was gone. And it was time for the final match. Alright, I suppose we don't even need to use the board now, Hayate declared, looking up at all the assembled shinobi and kunoichi. The final match will be between Rock Lee and Gaara, so both of you come on down. TCH. Neji turned away from the doors Sakura had left through at the announcement, clicking his tongue. The Hyuga began making his way back up at the same time Gaara impassively began making his way down and, yosh. Lee happily cheered, bouncing on his feet and rapidly shadowboxing in place, bandages fists guiding through the air like bullets. It is finally my turn, what a splendid time to be alive. Aisha, Lee. Guy shouted, cutting the leotard wearing Genin off and grabbed the boy around the neck. Listen carefully. I have made quite an astute observation I feel I must share with you before you explode with the power of youth. Yes, Guy-sensei. Lee gave him his full attention. Guy nodded before looking around almost suspiciously. Your opponent, that gourd on his back, is suspicious, he not so quietly revealed. Daiki snorted as Kakashi palmed his face at his side. I mean, he's not wrong. The Tangenin laughed lightly. Guy was always a riot. In small doses. Neither Lee nor Guy seemed to notice all the dry gazes sent their way. Especially since, Guy-sensei, thank you for your wisdom, I shall keep your words in mind. Lee happily took his words. Oh Lee. Guy swept the boy into a tight hug, tears streaming from his eyes. Guy-sensei. A hug that Lee was all too happy to return, tears budding in his eyes as well. These guys are weirdos. Naruto commented. Like you're one to talk. Daiki snorted. And the hell is that supposed to mean? The blonde turned to him with a glare. You're the one who likes turning into a hot busty female version of yourself. Daiki shrugged. Hot ha. Naruto snorted back at him. Can't be weird if it works. Daiki opened his mouth to respond, before pausing. That was pretty sound logic, to be honest. Not something he'd ever do, but the blonde wasn't wrong. No, it's still weird, dumbass. Sasuke scoffed. Shut the fuck up, bastard. Naruto gave a sneer. You're just saying that 'cause you know you'd never be able to match up to my sexy jutsu even if you did know it. As if. Sasuke growled, stepping forward to glare straight into the shorter, stockier blonde's eyes. I could do it far superior to you. I just won't lower myself to such stupidity. Are they seriously basically arguing about who would be hotter as a chick? Daiki thought blandly. Mama, calm down girls, you're both pretty. Kakashi interjected with an ice smile. How the fuck did he even do that? It was kind of creepy actually. Shut up, Kakashi-sensei. Both Uzumaki and Uchiha snapped at him together with twin glares of sapphire and onyx. Kakashi merely laughed and looked back down to his book. It was a good question to ponder though. I wonder if a female Sasuke could actually measure up to Naruto. Daiki mused inwardly. And what would his female version even be called? Sasuko? Satsuki? Whatever the case, Sasuke would have an uphill battle. If Naruto was actually Naruto, Daiki would have been all over her. That was just how hot she was. It was almost disappointing Naruto wasn't a girl in that sense. And a weird thought to have, to be honest. Thankfully one he didn't need to ponder long. Thanks to Lee leaping from the platform they were standing on to land below facing opposite Gaara. Gaara-san. Lee greeted the redhead Jinchuriki with a wide grin and a thumbs up. Facing you here and now makes me very happy. Gaara, arms crossed, didn't even blink or utter a sound, just staring completely impassively at the bowl-cut bearing teen. There was a popping sound, but before the sound had even finished echoing outwards, Lee's hand shot out, grasping the cork of Gaara's gourd that had shot across the distance between them in almost just a blink of the eye. Calm down, kid, Hayat huffed, rolling his eyes. Wait for my call before you two start fighting. Yes. Let us not rush things, Gaara-san, and enjoy this battle to our heart's content. Lee nodded, eyes going serious as he dropped the cork to the ground. That's the opposite of what you should be doing here. Daiki mused, leaning over the railing and eyeing them both. This should be a good fight and I'll be able to see what Gaara can do. Sasuke grinned, copying him. That guy gives me the creeps. Naruto frowned, something just wigs me out about him, but it'll be good to see what bushy brows can really do. Daiki already knew how this would go. Though he admitted, it'll be good to see the gates in action, he mused. It was just too bad he hadn't completed his new seal yet and sealed Shisui's Sharingan within him. It meant he wouldn't be able to copy the usage of the gates. Though, he'd still be able to see how Lee did it and perhaps puzzle it out himself. It couldn't be too complicated, he supposed, if Lee could actually do it. If nothing else, Daiki wanted to learn how to open the first gate. Actually, it was the one he was most interested in of all. Begin, Hayat declared. As soon as the beginning of the match was declared, Lee sprung forward as a blur of speed, twisting his whole body in a single motion and lashing out with a flying spin kick, Leaf Hurricane. He declared. His foot met a wall of sand that sprung up almost instantly. The sand swelled further, shaping into an almost fist-like shape and bashed Lee backwards. The force of it sent the boy rolling across the ground before he sprung up, landing in a crouch. That should have been the end right there. Daiki grimaced. If Gaara had wanted to, he could have easily crushed Lee's leg right then and there. He only didn't, because Gaara liked to play with his food. Sand. Naruto cried in shock. Sasuke wasn't really all that better. While he didn't make a sound, his wide-eyed stare spoke volumes. He was repelled so easily. The Uchiha commented. Lee's eyes narrowed and he pushed off, speeding to the side and winding around Gaara in a blur of motion that the vast majority of genin in the huge room they currently occupied probably couldn't even follow. Lee's fist whipped out, the air parting around his hand, and slammed into the wall of sand once again that swept around to block. Sand went flying and Lee lashed out with a rapid kick that sent even more spraying through the air. But it was like a bucket pail from a lake, hardly making a dent. Before the sand could swarm over his body, Lee quickly retreated, bouncing back in a set of quick hops and fell into a ready stance, eyeing Gaara wearily. Gaara meanwhile just continued to stare impassively, boredly even. Even bushy brows can't get through that sand with just taijutsu. Naruto grimaced. He's not fast enough to. Sasuke clicked his tongue. He should switch to ninjutsu for a bit, test the waters. He can't, Daiki informed. Lee's pretty much incapable of any worthwhile ninjutsu. He has absolutely no talent for either ninjutsu or genjutsu, so he's a pure taijutsu user. It wasn't that he had something wrong with him and was unable to use ninjutsu or genjutsu. Lee was just terrible at them and thus gave up ever being good with them and focused only on taijutsu. Though even then, this match was still far from over. Even if Daiki was still very sure of who was going to be walking away the winner in this fight, Lee just lacks the mindset to use his abilities properly and take the win. Daiki mused. If it were him in Lee's place, he would lose the weights and open the first gate and just absolutely pound Gaara's head in. No hitting him all over and wearing him down, he'd just target the same spot over and over again. And crush his skull. It would not only be the best way to deal with that sand armor, but it would also pose the least risk with using the gates themselves before he could handle them. And Lee couldn't handle the upper gates as he was right now. His body wasn't strong enough to withstand them currently. Even beyond the damage Gaara had done to him, the most damage had been done to Lee by himself. How boring. Gaara commented for the first time and lifted his hand towards Lee. As he did, the sand around him surged out rapidly and shot towards the older genin, who quickly sprang away, jumping up to the top of the giant hand statues, making the seal of reconciliation to escape the wave of sand. Lee, take him off, Guy shouted as he landed. He should have taken him off from the very beginning. Daiki scoffed inwardly. As much as he found Lee a pretty cool guy, that didn't change that his choices were stupid and he put himself at a handicap for his opponent with those weights. A massive negative black mark towards a promotion. Lee, after all, was the complete opposite of Shikamaru. While Shikamaru had the intelligence to be a chunin but lacked the strength and ability, Lee had the strength for it, but not the mentality. But Guy-sensei, Lee shouted back, completely taking his eyes off of his opponent, you said I must never take him off unless defending someone or something precious. It's okay, Lee, I approve of it in this instance. Guy grinned and flashed him a thumbs up. This was stupid. He'd loved this fight before. But watching it here in person, and being as he was now, it was frustrating him. He's a fucking shinobi. Why would he never take his weights off unless for something like that? Daiki scoffed inwardly, hands gripping the railing too tightly, the metal of it warped beneath his grip. He was lucky to never have been killed from that sheer stupidity. And even as he sat down to take off his weights, completely disregarding Gaara still, Daiki couldn't help but shake his head. The only reason he was even getting the chance to take him off right now was because Gaara had stopped attacking and was eyeing him with curiosity. If the redhead Jinchuriki was as pragmatic as he was ruthless, he'd just keep attacking and not give Lee the chance to show off. He was a freaking sitting duck right now. Watching this right now, Daiki came to a conclusion. Lee was far more stupid than Naruto ever was, and it was a wonder he ever made it to Chunin. Yosh. Here we go. Lee stood up after a second, carrying his weights in hand, before promptly dropping them. There was a mass of widening eyes as they slammed into the ground and sent debris flying as they created a pair of huge craters from the sheer weight. Another stupid move. Daiki scoffed inwardly again. Seeing how easy he could carry them, he should have thrown them as hard as he could. The sheer weight would have forced quite a bit of the sand to Gaara's defense and left his back just a bit more vulnerable. What the hell? Naruto gaped. Aren't you overdoing it, Guy? Kakashi mused dryly, looking over at the leotard-wearing sensei. Guy merely laughed. Ha, that's the way Lee. Explode. He cheered. Yes sir, Lee called out, crouching down into a runner's position, one leg pulled back, both hands placed on the ground statue and leaning forward. And then he took off, shooting towards Gaara with all his strength and speed, his body accelerating like a tightly compressed spring suddenly being released from a tight hold. The first thing Daiki noticed, that it was not at all subtle or gentle. The sheer force the older leotard-wearing genin took off with, shattered the top of the statue he was standing atop. And the air itself exploded with a sonic boom from his sheer speed. He crossed the distance in a split moment, getting behind Gaara before the red-haired Jinchuriki could react. His sand was not so slow though. A wall of sand rose up just as Lee's fist shot forth like a bullet aiming for the back of Gaara's head. It wasn't quite fast enough though and was too thin to stop the full speed and power behind the blow, and Lee's fist went straight through it. It was just enough though to slow Lee's blow down for more sand to rise up. Seeing that, the older genin quickly pulled his hand free and moved in a blur, circling around Gaara and launching out with a spin kick aimed at his head as the Jinchuriki turned to his back, already a step behind. Once again a thin wall of sand rose up and blocked the blow, but not enough to stop it from going through. And then Lee once again disengaged and duked around to Gaara's right as the redhead whirled around to face his front, another blazingly fast punch aiming for his cheek, which was once again softened by a thin wall of sand, forcing the bowl-cut sporting shinobi to circle around to the other side. Holy crap, he's so fast I can't even see him move. Naruto voiced in shock, blue eyes wide in disbelief. Sasuke at his side said nothing, but his eyes were just as wide, Sharingan shining brightly. Daiki crossed his arms as he watched Lee zip around Gaara, probing his sand defense with powerful rapid blows, switching to another point with each blow. I'm faster, Daiki noted for one, not by a massive amount, but he was faster than Lee was. The second thing he noticed was that Lee wasn't at all used to moving at the speeds he was currently moving at. He could see some lingering hesitation in his attacks, some almost amateurish movements here and there despite the older boy's obvious skill. He's not used to fighting without his weights, Daiki mused, which was to be expected considering the rules Guy had set for him. He probably only had a little experience sparring with Guy and possibly his teammates without his weights. But nothing more than that. And his inexperience with his current unhindered abilities shone brightly to Daiki's eyes. He was so fast Gaara's sand was having trouble keeping up and only barely managing to get a meager defense in place. Lee's blows were fast and heavy, each one capable of piercing through that meager defense. Yet, he never committed fully to his blows. He backpedaled every time he met resistance, coming from a different angle and trying to overwhelm the reaction time of the automatic sand defense. And while it was working, albeit slowly, with the sand defense, bit by bit putting up less of a defense, he could have gotten through from the very first blow if he just committed to it. He was draining his own stamina unnecessarily and giving Gaara time to adapt at the same time. Finally though, Lee having worn down the sand defense flipped and accelerated, coming around to Gaara's front and spun over the thinnest shield of sand rushing to his defense yet and brought a back heel kick down atop Gaara's skull. Lee's own momentum from the kick not only sent the bowl-cut sporting boy skidding back out of any retaliatory range, but sent Gaara skidding the opposite way as well, the redhead only kept upright by his sand. He, Guy puffed his chest out proudly. In terms of speed, there's not a single genin here that can keep up with Lee. All around Daiki could see people staring wide-eyed down at the boy, none more shocked than Temari, who was gripping the railing she was standing behind tightly and staring down at the spectacle below gobsmacked. There was a cracking sound that echoed audible as a fissure ran up Gaara's cheek. I'm faster, Daiki announced with a shrug. Honestly, he was actually a bit disappointed this was all Lee amounted to. He could be so much more right now if he just was smart about things and trained more without his weights on to get used to his speed. What use was all that speed and strength if he couldn't even use it properly? He felt many an eye on him after his announcement, but his eyes were more focused on somebody else. Specifically the sandy blonde on the other side of the room whose wide-eyed stare shot to him at his announcement. Of course you are, Sasuke scoffed, shaking his head at his side. Lee shot forward then in a blur of motion and for once, put his all in and committed fully. Gaara's sand wasn't fast enough to mount a large enough defense to block him before the older boy's fist smashed into his face and sent him flying back. Still, that was it. Lee didn't follow through. What a punch. I couldn't see him at all. Shikamaru voiced in shock. Wait, what? He followed with a sound of confusion a second later. Gaara's sand stopped him from falling, or taking any damage for that matter. The fissure on his face had opened up, fully displaying skin beneath. Despite the power of Lee's punch, the sand armor had blocked it. And Gaara had suffered no damage beyond that, because despite Lee's strength, the force behind it wasn't enough to rattle the redhead even through his armor. He should have followed through and just bullied him into the ground and keep attacking. Daiki shook his head. Not only was Lee hesitant to fully commit and inexperienced with his own abilities, he lacked the true edge to ruthless decimate his opponents. It wasn't at all a lack of ability or skill that held Lee back at all. It was his mindset. Right in this very moment, before Gaara could recover, Daiki in Lee's place would have opened the first gate and just hammered him with all his strength and not give him any chance to recover. Whoa, his face broke off. The hell? Naruto exclaimed. This sand jutsu sure is versatile. A two-layered defense, not only that shield of sand that seems to be faster than Gaara's own reaction speed but this sand armor as well. Anyone else would have been finished from a blow like that. Sasuke grunted out. They call it the ultimate defense in Suna. Daiki explained for them. Since Kankuro wasn't around right now fishing for information through Naruto and here to explain it, the sand shield is automatic. He doesn't even need to control it himself. It's akin to a bloodline and he can repair that armor of his on the fly. To punctuate his statement, sand flowed up from Gaara's shield and formed over the hole in his armor and filled it up again. That's bullshit, Naruto shouted, squinting his eyes and pointing down at Gaara. How the hell is somebody supposed to get through that then? That's pretty easy, Daiki replied with a shrug. He already had multiple avenues through it, for one bullying through the simple way, or just avoiding it entirely and point blank. Blasting him with his force palm jutsu and letting the shock wave travel straight through. Once again multiple eyes landed on him, but he said nothing else. Well, Sasuke arched a brow at him. Figure it out yourself, Daiki snorted. I'm not here to spoon feed you wimps the answers. Sasuke clenched his jaw, before nodding in understanding. Hey, I bet you're just talking shit and don't actually know. Naruto snorted. It seems, I must resort to more drastic measures, Lee announced, saving Daiki from having to respond to the blonde. Saving Naruto really, from a major burn. The leotard-wearing genin reached for the bandages on his arms and unwound them. Looks like he's going for the lotus now. Daiki mused. Things were playing out exactly as he figured they would. He crossed his arms and watched. Lee shot towards Gaara and circled around him, making the redhead think he was going to attack from behind. But it was a feint and the leotard-wearing teen circled around again to Gaara's front, launching a mule kick towards his chin that sent the redhead flying. Or so it seemed. It was actually a clone Gaara made on the fly within his sand shield and switched with just before the kick connected, using his own sand armor as a cover to mask the switch. Daiki could see it all with his eyes. The primary lotus was quite powerful. The sheer force it impacted the ground with a few moments later when Lee got behind the sand clone with the shadow of the dancing leaf and wrapped it up with the bandages of his arms, left a huge multiple meter crater in the ground. Even Daiki would have trouble walking one of those off. Too bad, as he knew, it was a clone. And while everyone was announcing Lee's win, a familiar redhead rose up out of the sand behind him, a manic grin on his face. All that was within the impact site was an empty sand shell in the likeness of Gaara. Lee's eyes widened, as did everyone else's. When did he slip out of that shell? I never even saw it. Guy exclaimed in shock. Exactly. Daiki rolled his eyes. The replacement technique Gaara used was seamlessly done and hidden completely from view. Only a dujutsu like his own or the Byakugan could have seen it happen. He doubted the Sharingan could actually. A quick glance at Sasuke's shocked expression answered that question for him as well. Hey. Gaara chuckled ominously and formed a ram seal. The sand around him surged in size and exploded forward like a rushing wave and slammed into Lee, who was too hurt from the primary lotus to dodge. The sand carried him across the arena and slammed him into and through the wall. The only reason he didn't end up in another room entirely was because of how huge the wall itself was, but even then, when the sand was pulled back a bit by Gaara, a huge crater had formed in the wall with Lee in the middle. He was bloody and bruised, his leotard ripped and stained with blood, on his knees, arms crossed in a feeble block. But he would be dead if Gaara actually wanted him to die right then and there. Gaara still wasn't taking him seriously. Why didn't he dodge? He's way faster than that sand. Naruto asked loudly, confused. The primary lotus, that technique he just used, is a double-edged sword without the right conditioning. Daiki responded before Guy or Kakashi could. After using it, his body isn't in any shape to move like before. Indeed, Kakashi nodded and gave Daiki a shrewd glance. Your knowledge is something else, kid. Daiki shrugged. Guy is pretty famous and I put thought into learning the strong fist myself once, he replied. The feather fist suits me more though. I wonder about that, Kakashi hummed, but said nothing else. Cut your cryptic crap, you morons, Naruto scoffed. More importantly, doesn't what you said mean bushy brows can't win? He could have won already if he wasn't being stupid. Daiki rolled his eyes and glanced over towards the bold cut bearing Jonin looking down upon the match proudly. Guy-sensei, tell him to give up, he called over. As much as he would like to see the 8 gates in action and learn from it, it wasn't worth Lee damaging his spine and putting his life in jeopardy over a freaking Chunin exams that happened every 6 months. Especially since going through with what he wouldn't get him promoted anyway and would be a demerit against his promotion. Worried are you, Daiki-kun? Guy looked over and must have confused quite a few people when he grinned. There's no need to worry, my young friend. For the lotus of Konoha blooms twice. I know, Daiki cut him off. Going that far for a single match in the Chunin exams is stupid though. There's no point in doing this. He already could have won if he was smart about things. Instead, he doesn't know how to handle his own abilities because he hasn't fought enough without his weights off and he's too hesitant and kind to leverage his strength properly. Your concern for Lee is admirable, Daiki-kun. Guy smiled at him, but you need not worry, Lee is strong. Just from that single statement, Daiki knew he wouldn't budge. He wasn't caring about logic. It was all a logical sappy emotion. Daiki was surprised how angry he found himself becoming, his teeth involuntarily grinding together. Guy, don't tell me you taught him how to open the gates. Kakashi gaped at his fellow Jonin sensei, and when Guy merely smiled wider, Kakashi huffed, I'm disappointed in you, Guy. Guy scoffed, you don't know the first thing about that child, Kakashi, so you don't understand. He shook his head and replied, Lee needed this. He doesn't need to use it here. Daiki bit out with a growl before looking down at Lee himself. Lee, give up, you've wasted your chances, going any further will just destroy you. Lee looked up at the sound of Daiki's voice and gave him a tired grin. I cannot do that, Daiki-kun, my friend. He called back, here and now, I will show that even one such as I who cannot use ninjutsu or genjutsu can become a splendid ninja. You've already did that. You're one of the strongest guys here. Daiki snapped, you could have won already if you were smart about things and started without your weights or just hammered him properly without pussying out. Going any further won't prove anything and just show you're not Chunin material. Lee bowed his head for but a moment at Daiki's words before rising back up and facing Gaara, resolute. I'm sorry, Daiki-kun, but this is something I must do. He shut his logic down fully with a single statement. Your concern is appreciated, Daiki-kun, But one born as talented as you cannot understand Lee? Guy smiled proudly. That boy has a dream he believes in so profoundly and is chasing it so passionately that he is willing to die for the sake of out. There was no reasoning with these people. Daiki gaped at them both, at a loss for words, his mouth opening and closing, looking for and failing to find the words to reply. This was so stupid. It was admirable to chase his dreams so passionately, but risking it all over a fucking Chunin exams that happened every 6 months. Just to beat one person in a fight that wouldn't get him promoted anyway. Don't do this, Lee, Daiki almost pleaded. Why was he so invested in this? He knew how it would go. He couldn't wrap around his own concerns, or their own lack of logic. I must. Lee spread his arms wide and Daiki saw as the chakra within his body began to rush towards certain points, flowing in an almost erratic manner, before rushing up through a certain point located near his brain, gate of opening, release. Pathetic. Daiki spat and before he even knew what he was doing, he was storming away. He got odd glances from quite a few. Hinata reached out to him as he passed by her, but hesitated and let him go by without a word. He left the room behind amidst Lee's shouts as he released one gate after another. He couldn't bear to stand by and watch when such idiocy was taking place. Quite simply, Daiki had to leave the room before he did something stupid and intervened on Lee's behalf himself. That was not his place. Even as thunderous booms echoed from the arena out into hallway and reverberated through the very tower itself, Daiki refused to even look. With his jaw clenched, he ignored everything utterly. Fucking idiot. Winning one fight isn't worth your life. The others people's worrying for you mean fucking nothing. Daiki raged internally, fists clenched. It took all he had not to just start punching craters in the walls in sheer frustration. He wanted to go back in there and kick Lee's ass, and then Gaara's while he was at it. Maybe challenge Guy as well and try and beat his ass for being so damn stupidly sentimental and not taking his job seriously. The thunderous impacts didn't last long. Less than a minute, and gave Daiki enough peace and quiet for a minute or so, to take a damn chill pill and calm himself. Which would have worked, if the doors at his side didn't blast open and a pair of medic nin carrying a familiar unconscious leotard-wearing boy out in a rush, Guy hurrying along behind them. Hang on, Lee, the man shouted. He paused as he caught sight of Daiki though, while the medic nin continued on, carrying Lee away. Daiki-kun. Guy gave a visible grimace. Was it worth it? Daiki couldn't help but taunt the man. He didn't answer and looked away. Daiki found himself sneering on instinct. He turned his nose up at the man and walked away, heading back into the arena. I used to think he was the best sensei before, he thought. Now, not so much. At least personally now, he knew not what to do. Between Guy and Kakashi, Daiki figured he had a full-on example of what not to do, as a sensei and perhaps even a parental figure. There was a stunned silence that greeted Daiki when he made his way back into the large room the prelims were taking place in. The bottom floor, which before the final fight had taken little damage, was riddled with craters, spider web cracks and piles of debris. Many a paled, shock-filled face met his gaze when his eyes swept over the room. Specifically the likes of Ino and Shikamaru, who were amongst the weakest gathered within the room, couldn't hide the disturbed looks they had at all, such was their shock at the fight they just witnessed. Daiki's eyes roved over to the other side of the room, specifically, upon the two remaining Sand siblings within the wide-spaced room. Despite the damage done to her clothing and such that had came from her fight with Tenten, there was a wide, smug smirk on Temari's face, her arms crossed. While at her side, stood Gaara, his clothing torn and frayed, yet not a single bruise upon him, an impassive look upon his face. Teal eyes met Daiki's own, sensing his gaze upon him, and Gaara stared back at Daiki, examining him. Daiki couldn't hold back the scoff that erupted from his throat, frustration bubbling inside him. All that big talk about your dreams and using a forbidden jutsu that you couldn't even handle, and for what? To ruffle his clothes a bit. He thought derisively of Lee's efforts. Lee's courage was vastly overshadowed by his own stupidity. If he was deserving of anything at all, it was not a Chunin vest, but rather, a Darwin Award. The fool had his whole life ahead of him to accomplish his dream, and he threw it all away for a completely meaningless fight. Of course, the silence didn't last for long. "This is bullshit," Naruto complained loudly. Daiki rolled his eyes as he looked away from Gaara to the blonde, to see him with his arms crossed, blue eyes narrowed into a glare and a snarl on his lips. They're supposed to be medic ninja, right? How can they not help him? The blonde kicked the railing, the pole his foot connected with bending. Bushy brows was so desperate. He kept saying how much he wanted to fight Sasuke and that Neji guy. "'Cause they're not miracle workers, dumbass." Daiki scoffed loudly, drawing eyes to him. He honestly didn't care right now. Naruto had made himself a convenient target to unleash a bit of his frustration on. "You're back," Naruto noted in surprise, before shaking his head and growling, "and what's that supposed to mean? I've seen those guys heal broken bones pretty easily before. They should be able to heal what that sand jerk did to him." "Moron." Daiki crossed his arms. "It isn't what Raccoon Boy did to him that's the problem. It's what he did to himself. The gates are called a forbidden jutsu for a reason, because of the toll it takes on the body to use them. Lee was just too weak. End of story." "The hell you say?" Naruto snarled indignantly, uncrossing his arms and tensing his shoulders in Daiki's direction. "Did you see how Bushy Brows fought? There ain't nothing weak about that guy. Besides, what would you know? You stormed off before the fight was even finished just 'cause Bushy Brows wouldn't listen to you. And look where he ended up." Daiki shot back. "If he listened to me, he wouldn't be a cripple for life." "And for what? To soothe his ego and claim he can fight against the strong. If the moron bided his time until he could handle the gates better, that would never be a problem, but he traded everything for a single meaningless fight against an utter weakling." Weakling. Naruto gaped at him, and he was not the only one. Daiki didn't bother looking to see who else was shocked by it, but the way Sasuke's eyes widened briefly and how Kakashi furrowed his brows was telling enough. "You heard me." Daiki rolled his eyes. "Gaara ain't shit, none of you are. I could beat every single genin in this room with one arm tied behind my back. The fact Lee would waste his life to try and one-up another weakling just shows how pathetic he is. And the best of it is, he crippled himself with his own jutsu. Gaara literally could have just huddled up inside his sand and let Lee kill himself and show how inept he really is. Laying it on a little thick, aren't you?" Isabu mused. Yet, his Bayu partner did not claim he was wrong. Because he wasn't. It was pathetic. There was nothing noble or heroic or even worth admiring about what Lee did. It was just a pathetic waste of potential. This had been building up for a while, to be honest, since the prelims began. From everyone's stupidity about how the Chunin exams worked and what being a ninja meant, to the sheer stupidity of nonsense streams pushing these morons to even stupider heights. You want to be Hokage? Then learn what being a Hokage actually fucking meant. You want to become a strong ninja with only taijutsu? That was fine. But don't throw everything away for one single fight that meant nothing. Like, what the fuck would beating a single genin, Jinchuriki or not mean in the grand scheme of things in the prelims with a limited viewing capacity? It proved nothing. It's not even as if I can heal him either. Daiki grit his teeth in frustration. He'd got a good look at the boy as he wheeled past on the stretcher. Not only were his muscles torn all across his body, not only were his arm and leg bones completely shattered, but he had fucking shards of bone lodged into his spine. There was a difference between healing someone and surgery, and he'd need fucking miracle surgery to get this bone fragments out. At best, Daiki would be able to keep the moron alive during such an operation, but even then, considering how long such a surgery would take, with how delicate it would be, it would take up quite a lot of life force to do so. Daiki had neither the skill, nor the life force available to help Lee. There was multiple spikes of killing intent directed at him for his words. And not just from the Sand siblings and their sensei. Though, none even came close to the roiling wrath directed at him by Redhead on the other side of the room. Blood was pumping in Daiki's ears and his lips pulled back into a snarl as he turned around and glared murder at the redhead, trying to smother him with his intent to murder him. "You better rein yourself in right fucking now, you damn fucking clown," he snarled, his own killing intent rising to the surface. "I'm not in the mood to play with you right now, so sit down, shut your ass up, or I'm gonna come over there and pulp your skull between my palms." It would be so easy too. That sand armor wouldn't do shit to block his force palm jutsu. He'd just use his heavenly star seal and draw on the first stage of Isabu's chakra, blitz straight through his hand, clap both hands over the idiot's ears and unleash a pair of force palm jutsu and pulp his brain from both ends. "Calm down, Daiki. Your frustration and temper are getting the better of you. They aren't worth getting worked up over and ruining your plans," Isabu cautioned gently. Daiki took a deep shuddering breath at his companion's words. He was right, but it was oh so hard with how childish and naive these people, his friends even, were. Which is why it annoys you so much, because their lives aren't something easily replaceable. Isobo replied lightly. Ellipsis. Enough. The Sandaim's voice was calm and level, yet somehow seemed to echo with a thunderous ruling force. The killing intent spread throughout the room, sputtered and died instantly in the face of the authority inherent through his voice. Naruto scowled at Daiki one last time, but didn't speak up. Even he knew better than to really go against the Hokage's command. The arguments were put to an end, and before long, all of them were directed down to stand in a line in front of the Hokage. And by all of them, he meant all 9 of them that had passed the preliminaries. Daiki himself, alongside Naruto, Sasuke, Shikamaru, Hinata, Neji, Temari, Gaara and Stretchy Guy, Kabuto's teammate. Daiki honestly couldn't remember his name. Nor did he care. He was a traitor anyway. Daiki eyed him speculatively out of the corner of his eye. I should take care of him in advance, he mused. It would make the 3rd round of the exam move smoother and he could rip some information out of the man's head. Like the location of some of Orochimaru's bases. And perhaps how his jutsu was used. Daiki for the life of him couldn't remember how his jutsu worked. Does it make his body rubber or something? He wondered. If it did, then it might be worth stealing for himself. If not, it could at least be useful for if he ever got tied up or something. Sarutobi went on to explain how now that the prelims were finished, the next part of the exam, the 3rd and final round, would be another series of 1 versus 1 fights that would take place a month from now. As expected, quite a few didn't understand why, Naruto as expected among them. And the old man had to once again go over the fact that the Chunin exams was in fact just a glorified dick measuring contest, and they had to give some time for people of power from around the elemental countries to make their way to Konoha to watch. Honestly, it's constantly in one ear and out the other with these people. Daiki rolled his eyes. Even Shikamaru, for all his vaunted intelligence, was just the same in that regard. Once again, the Nara clan heir was a prime example of why intelligence did not mean wisdom, nor did it mean common sense either for that matter. Finally though, things came to a close and everything was dismissed. As Daiki was about to leave and head home to plot his next move though, the Hokage caught his eye and gave a single slight jerk of his chin for him to follow, before disappearing out of sight with a body flicker. Daiki sighed, but did as bid. He left the room behind with a body flicker of his own before anybody could talk to him or, in Naruto's case, continue their argument from before. He followed the Sandaime straight to the top of tower. It was a simple small sitting room with 2 couches and a table in between them. When he arrived mere seconds after leaving the arena behind, it was to find the Sandaime already waiting for him, sitting placidly on one couch. Ah, Daiki-kun, Sarutobi smiled at warmly and gestured at the opposite couch. Have a seat. Sure. Daiki shrugged, doing as said and collapsing into the couch. He didn't even bother sitting on it, he just lay straight across it and propped his head up on one arm. So what's up? He asked, though he already had a feeling he knew what would be getting brought up here. We can get to that in a bit. Hiruzen's warm smile didn't even twitch at his utter disregard of propriety. In fact, his eyes twinkled with amusement. How are you feeling? That was quite the outburst you had. He didn't need to specify. It was obvious he was talking about how pissed off and frustrated Daiki was about Rock Lee. Lee pissed me off with his utter stupidity. Daiki shrugged. Guy should have had the common sense to stop him and not encourage him. Now, unless Tsunade comes back, he'll be crippled for life. And call it him being petty. But right now, Daiki didn't feel up to trying to fix the idiot. You seem so sure of that. Hiruzen mused. Daiki shrugged again. I saw his injuries with my eyes, he replied. Even beyond what Gaara did to him, it's what the gates did to him that's the real problem. He's got shards of bone stuck in his spine. Our medic ninja are pretty good, but like I said, they're not miracle workers and they're not Tsunade either. I see. Hiruzen's brows furrowed. That is a disappointing thing to learn. And there is no way Tsunade will help the boy. Not only will she not come back, but beyond even that he trailed off. She's afraid of blood, so even if she did come back, her skills as a medic are utterly useless. Daiki finished for him. Unless Naruto went and talked no jutsu'd her bodacious blonde ass into coming back and getting over her fear of blood, Lee was fucked without Daiki himself going out of his way. Hiruzen's eyebrows rose at his words, but nodded. Quite. He agreed.
Everybody subscribe, like, share, and comment. Follow me on Instagram. Bye, friends.